What's up, everybody? What's up, family? Platitude, what's good, Holly? Holly's always right. One of the first in here. I appreciate that, Holly. Steve Smythe, what's good, what's good, Algabus. We've got a great show. We got a great show today. I'm excited. We'll be interviewing Ash Kalra. He's an assemblyman in the California Assembly. He just recently introduced the California single payer healthcare bill, CalCare. And so we're going to discuss with him the process of that, what roadblocks he sees coming up, because those will be there. Those will be there. And what his plan to do about those are. So I'm excited for that. I've known Ash. I've talked to Ash on Twitter for maybe around a year now. So finally able to have him on the show. Excited about that. We're going to talk with Briahna Joy Gray about what's going on in politics right now. What happened with obviously the Daunte Wright shooting. We're going to talk about that. And we're also going to talk about a recent article that she recently interviewed, Anand Giridharadas. I'm not exactly sure how to say his last name, but everyone knows what I'm talking about. We're going to talk about that article, her thoughts on that, and then we're going to hopefully. I haven't confirmed it. I'm pretty sure we're going to have Kenneth Mejia on at 4. So it's going to be a long stream. We'll probably be done around 4:30. So everyone strap in. Everyone strap in. We're going to have some great guests and it'll be fun. How's everyone been doing? What's everyone been up to? I'm starting football pretty soon here, so I've been busy trying to do this, working out, getting ready. We're going to start our virtual off season, new coaching staff, all that. So that starts next week. So things will get busy, but don't worry, I'm gonna still be uploading. Yeah, it's gonna be fun. So we got about 10, 11 minutes. I work 5 nights a week. I'm tired, and I feel that. I'll be tired too. And I mean, I work obviously, but in a different fashion. DJ Kenster was good. Was good. It's been kind of quiet, I feel like, in the news. I mean, obviously, other than what happened in Minnesota, what's going on in Minnesota, but just as far as legislatively, it's kind of been quiet in the news. But there have been some interesting pieces coming out about strategy, right? About what progressives feel like they can get done, what they've them kind of reflecting on what Biden did the past 100 days. Articles coming out from Joe Manchin writing his opinion piece on how he's not going to change the filibuster. I feel like we should talk about that more. We should talk about that more, because without getting rid of the filibuster, or at least reforming it, you're not going to get anything done. So I don't even know why we're spending time on all these conversations if no one's going to confront or address Joe Manchin, who just wants to put a wrench in everything. I feel like that's skipped over a lot, not talked about a lot. So yeah. So those only real things I've been seeing in the news. I did just cover a story, if you guys want to take a look at it after the live stream, but drug overdoses skyrocketed during COVID, and I figured they would. And it's sad. And of course, Joe Biden, he's going to extend a Trump era policy to just continue to criminalize this stuff. Why? Because Joe Biden, I mean, that's who Joe Biden is. That's who he's always been. And if no one's going to stand up to him, there was a lot of civil rights activists and groups urging him through a letter. I mean, that's pretty much all we can do nowadays. He completely ignored that. So yeah, Peter said deaths of despair. That's exactly right. And I mean, that makes sense considering COVID, sparked so much isolation, so much struggle, so much grief, sadness, all these things. So it's really not surprising. It's unfortunate, but of course we don't have anything in place. We don't have any mechanisms in place to actually address that. You know, we don't have a national healthcare system. We don't have, we don't push mental health care. We stigmatize mental health care. So Kyle spoke about Justice Dems not using Tea Party tactics with salt tax. Yeah, no, it's not. It's not the Justice Dems using the Tea Party tactics. It's the conservative Dems using it. They're saying we're gonna tank this bill. We're gonna tank this bill unless you put a tax cut for our wealthy donors in there. So the only people that can really write off all those taxes are people that own stuff, people that own assets, i.e., property, right? So how many, like, especially when it comes to like New York, right, and especially New York City, how many just normal average Joes that own huge amounts of property, huge amount of assets they can write off? Yeah, everyone go ahead, hit the like button, subscribe. Okay, so actually our first guest is here a little early. I like that. I appreciate that. So let's welcome Ash Kalra to the stream. Ash, what's going on? How you doing?
I'm good, Justin. So good to meet you virtually, man. Big fan of yours. I've been a Chargers fan since before you were born, but I'm even more excited about how active you are and how you're educating the community.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I appreciate that. I was telling the stream, everyone in the chat, we've been talking on Twitter for a while, but I'm finally excited to actually get you on the show, be able to talk to you. I haven't got a chance to talk to you. I know you're doing a lot of stuff within the California legislature, to push progressive priorities, i.e., you recently just introduced CalCare. Remind me again what the actual bill is, like SB.
It's Assembly bill, so it's AB 1400.
AB 1400. Okay, so AB 1400. If none of y'all know, that's the single payer healthcare bill that just got introduced by Ash and some of the other assembly members within the assembly here in California. So what was that? Well, because I believe it was written by the nurses. Is that correct?
Well, we work with them on it. So
work with them, right?
Yeah, and so my team has been working with them for months, really, over the past several weeks, and we introduced it towards the end of February. And it's a good bill. It's a good policy bill. There was a bill introduced 4 years ago, which was also a good bill that I was a co-author on. But this one I think is even better because it actually has cost containment in it. So it has cost controls. And so just basically what that means is that you can have single payer, but if you're not containing the cost, you're just throwing money down a bottomless pit. And so what we're trying to do is, while giving access and healthcare to everyone, we also want to have some methodology in there that actually controls the cost on pharmaceuticals, on treatments, and all that. And so it's a pretty comprehensive policy bill.
Okay. And as far as the bill 4 years ago, I think I remember that actually, some journalists covering that. And the big, like you were saying, the big, I guess, pushback against it was it wasn't funded fully. Was that it didn't have the funding written into the bill? So how did y'all, accommodate that ask?
We're still working on that part, and this is the thing about it, because everyone knows that our current system is the most expensive in the world, and that every legitimate study shows single payer will be less expensive. But it's not as simple as saying, let's just move money from bucket A to bucket B. Bucket B might be CalCare single payer, but there isn't a bucket A. Money comes in a convoluted way in so many different streams. And remember, that's been done by intention over decades to make it more complicated. The more complicated it is, the harder it is to change. And so legitimately and rightfully so, 4 years ago, there was a question like, well, you don't have anything on funding, but you want to pass this policy. And we have to be very careful about that, because Vermont, they passed a policy, they got waivers from the federal government, and then they abandoned it because they didn't have any funding. And so what I'm doing is I'm working with the nurses, with the speaker's office, on a separate bill vehicle, a separate bill that would deal with actually bridging the gap on funding, because right now, over half of our healthcare funding is already public. It's federal and state money. Over 200 to 220 billion of it, we're already paying for. The majority of the rest is employer funded. So how do you get that employer funded money? And that's what we're trying to figure out. It's a huge sum of money, even if it's less expensive than our current system. You've got to find what kind of taxation, what kind of mechanisms you have to put in place. So it's extremely complicated. We've been working on it internally, and we're hoping to continue to move it forward simultaneously and on a parallel track with the policy bill.
Okay. So where is CalCare at right now within the process?
So where it is in the process right now, we've introduced it. We're trying to work to get it referred to the first committee, which is the health committee. Now, our understanding is, and I think it's legitimate to ask, is like, well, before we refer it to health committee, where are you on the funding side of it? And so we're trying to work on that to a place of comfort where everyone's comfortable. Okay, we actually have some progress going forward on the funding so that we can have the policy bill heard. And so this is all going to be determined really in the next days, week or two. We've got to have a path forward. So I will know in the next week or so if it's going to get referred to health committee. And if it does, then you'll certainly hear more about it, because we're going to have a public hearing on CalCare in the health committee. And that's my hope.
Okay. Awesome. Wow. So that could be coming up pretty soon here. What's the biggest barrier to this getting passed? Now we obviously know California is a super majority Democratic state, completely controlled by Democrats, right? And nationally, we know that single payer, is supported by 9 out of 10 Democrats, poll after poll, and it's actually now supported by a majority of Republicans as well in a lot of polls. So, and I believe there's been polling done in California as well that shows majority of people want single payer healthcare. So where is the gap between the legislators and the people and what the people want?
And I'll add one more to that, is like even doctors now, a majority favor single payer. The younger generation of doctors are far in favor of single payer. But that being said, and so this is the issue that comes up sometimes, is that we know, like when I say that our current system is more expensive, in the order of tens of billions of dollars more than what single payer will cost, well, where do you think that money is going? It's going to profit. It's going to profit of industries that have a huge amount of influence, because we still have an enormous amount of money in our political system. I'm one of only 2 legislators that don't take corporate PAC money in legislature. So that money has an influence, and what we have to do is recognize it's not enough to say polling supports it. It's not enough to be part of the movement, whether you were for Bernie Sanders, whether you're a Democratic Socialist. It's not good enough to say, well, we support it, so our legislators got to do what we say. It's a movement, and movement building requires us to not only say this is what we're for, but legislators in Sacramento, not only do we want you to vote for it, but if you do, we've got your back, right? Because you have to remember that when folks vote against those moneyed interests, it's not as simple as saying, okay, I think this policy is good and it's right, I'm going to vote for it. It's that next election cycle, they're going to have tens, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions spent against them. And so if they don't believe there's a policy that legitimately has a path of going forward, it's a safer bet for them to lay off of it and say, wait a second, if this isn't going to be moving forward, I'm going to hold off for a second. And oh, by the way, movement that says you're in favor of this, where are you when I do vote for it and they're coming after me? And so that's kind of like the larger piece where we have to not only hold to account those that aren't there, but we have to help get the Democrats that may be a little, because some of the seats that we have, although we have a supermajority, they're purple seats, and they know that if they anger these industries that have a huge amount of interest too much, they're going to put their seats in jeopardy, and we'd much rather have that Democrat there than some Republican that's going to swoop in. And so that's where it's like we have to be strategic, both in terms of the policy, but also the politics, and saying, hey, we're for single payer, and if you're going to help us get there, we're going to have your back the next election cycle. Sometimes that second step doesn't happen, where, look, just last year, Uber, Lyft, all these wealthy corporations got Prop 22 passed.
Yep.
Overwhelming, because they spent almost $250 million. The drug companies, we had a bill to put controls on pharmaceutical costs in California. We couldn't get it passed because the drug companies spent over $100 million. So that's what I got to say, as a progressive, to the progressive movement, we got to show up. It's not just a matter of us making noise or being on social media or criticizing our legislators at a rally. We got to show up at the polls. We got to make it clear that we're going to stand up for our values in every aspect of the political system,
Yeah, no, I feel that. And I think a good example of that happened in Seattle with the, assembly woman, Kashama Sawant, who went up against Amazon, the biggest corporation probably in the world. And because of that movement that she had behind her, because she showed up at rallies, because she was, on the front lines, and that was, they're trying to recall her because of all the work that she's actually done to actually get that minimum wage implemented, to actually get a tax on Amazon to pay for some of this stuff. She was actually able to get that, passed. So like, what do you feel about that type of politics? Like, of course you're in the assembly, but that does not mean you, like, there's examples like Ashama there, Ralph Nader. There's a bunch of examples in the past when AOC showed up at Nancy Pelosi's office. Like, how do you feel about you also being a part of that? Because when people see you on the front lines as well, willing to say, okay, I'm out here fighting with y'all, I think that gives people a lot of hope as well. So how do you feel about those type of politics?
Look, I think we got to be on the ground too. Look, I mean, I was there with McDonald's workers that went on strike at 5 a.m. when they came back from a 4-day strike. I was there at the rallies rallying in front of Uber's headquarters, rallying against Prop 22. I show up everywhere I can where I think that my presence will make a difference, because that's where I come from. I was a public defender for 11 years. I never planned on being an elected official. I used to be in the rallies. I was there when they were like shooting out the pepper spray when we were in 2004. I was in DC. We were protesting Bush's inauguration, and I was out in the streets last year with my community. I was with the Black Lives Matter movement. When I was in City Hall in San Jose, I was the only council member to show up with Occupy San Jose when the Occupy movement was happening. So I do believe you have to have both. You've got to. If I'm not there with the people, I feel a disconnect. At the same time, I've got to be in this building that I'm in right now and know how to get my colleagues to vote for the things that I'm trying to push, whether it's the Racial Justice Act, whether it's single payer, you name it. I'm pushing a lot of this really. When I come to my colleagues to talk about a bill, they know, okay, here comes the Colorado bill again, because they know I'm not here just to do easy things. I'm here to do big things because my time is limited here. I see my political mortality. I don't know how many years I'm in this position, so I'm going to push. So I absolutely believe that elected officials do need to be with the people, and the people have to understand the challenges we face when we step into this building. And it's a really lonely feeling at times. When you're a progressive and you're trying to push things, it can be really lonely, and we get it. That it's hard for us to push things here, and then we get attacked by some of our allies on the left when we're not doing as much as they think we should be able to do. But you know what? I signed up for it. I'm here, and I'm in for the fight.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I understand. Look, I'm in a field as well, playing sports where it can feel lonely, particularly because of the amount of money that's in that. And what usually goes in accordance with that is conservative politics, right? You want tax cuts, this and that. So I feel you on that, and I think like you said, I think it is important to let's not put ourselves first. Let's put the people that are actually struggling first, right? And so that's why I really appreciate what you're saying. What do you think? Let's say best case scenario, right? It gets through the committees. It gets to the speaker. So first off, what is the speaker's role in all of this? Speaker Rendon, I believe his name is, because there's been a lot of people on the left, progressives, have been very frustrated with Speaker Rendon in the past. Obviously in 2017, like you were saying, he mentioned a lot of stuff about how the bill was incomplete. Other people could argue, well, you're the speaker, why don't you help complete it? But what is his role in this, and how close or how much of a push is it going to need to get it past his desk for it to get actually a vote on the floor?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I'll say, look, it's not one person. Even the person in the position of the speaker, this is not about one person holding a bill or not holding a bill. Look, a few years ago, he asked, hey, tell me how, let's work on the financing, and there was no response back from the bill author. It's not up to the speaker to get bills through. It's up to the authors of the bill. It is up to me to try to get through the best I can, try to convince my colleagues, the movement outside, try to convince the speaker, we've been working in his office. It's at the end of the day, it's not about whether, look, 4 years ago, when there was no real response from the bill author on how you're going to pay for it. While right now we're having these conversations, when the speaker holds that bill, he's taking the arrows for the entire Democratic caucus. And so unless we get enough colleagues that are going to support it, it doesn't matter whether the speaker supports it or not. We get a lot of bills that die that the speaker supports and goes forward, and they don't get enough bills. They don't get enough votes on the floor of the assembly, or they don't get enough votes on the committee during committee. So it's not just about the speaker, who's a friend of mine, who actually, we've gotten a lot of progressive things done that never would have been done under other speakers, because he himself holds progressive values, but he also has a caucus to run. He's not gonna, if I, Ash Kalra, can't get the votes for a bill, that's on me, and it's on the movement, and it's on the sponsors. Like, we've got to get that momentum building. And so I've taken up the responsibility to try my best, and that's why not only on 1400, but on the funding piece, I'm putting my time and energy to try to resolve those issues too, because I don't want to be Vermont, where they pass single payer and then abandon it because they couldn't figure out how to pay for it. I'm not here just to get social media clout. Like, I'm introduced single payer. I want credit for that. No, I don't want any of that. At the end of the day, if this gets through with someone else's name on it, I'm fine. But we've got to take a serious effort at it. And there are a lot of pieces in there, including working with the speaker's office.
And okay, so back to my original question, say best case scenario, it passes, gets a vote on the floor, it passes, then it goes to the governor's desk, right? And he's signaled that he supports single payer. How much of a chance do you think it actually has a passing if it makes it to that level?
Well, first look, it's a long haul just to get it through the assembly, but then again, it has to go to the Senate. So there's a whole nother. So let's just, under your hypothetical, it gets to the governor's desk, then we have to hold him to what he campaigned on. Look, I a big reason why I endorsed Governor Newsom is because he campaigned in support of single payer. The big reason why I was a delegate, a Bernie Sanders delegate to the Democratic Convention. I was a Pleo delegate. I voted against the Democratic platform because it didn't have single payer. It also didn't have decriminalizing marijuana and a couple other things, but single payer was a huge part of it. And so as Democrats in California, single payer is on the platform. Our governor campaigned for it. So if it gets to his desk, I think that, the amount of work it's going to take to get it to his desk, at that point, it has been, trust me, fully vetted if it gets to a point where it's to his desk. And I would expect him to sign it. But there's a long way to go there, and I'm going to engage the governor's office. I've already had touch base with them somewhat on it. He does have his own Healthcare for All commission that is going to continue its work this year. We're going to engage with that to whatever extent we can, to make sure that any questions we need answered. So look, at the end of the day, I think that we are in a position with the Biden administration having Javier Becerra, our former Attorney General here, now as the Secretary of Health and Human Services. He's publicly been in support of single payer. That helps us in terms of a pathway forward on getting federal waivers. If we don't get federal waivers to be able to use federal money, we're done. So there's like four or five, six different things that have to happen that we have to move simultaneously. And so right now, the policy and the funding piece, we have to do things on what are constitutional amendments regarding GAN limit and Prop 90. It's a whole bunch of things we have to do. And so to get it to the governor's desk and to get the federal government to fund it, and eventually to have to go to the voters. And that's where the movement's going to better have to show up and put their vote where their mouth is and show up, because we're going to be facing hundreds of millions of dollars of money against us. But, that's what the movement's about, to try to get it there over the course of the years ahead.
How frustrating is it for you when you know that, every other developed country in the world has this policy, yet we're in 2021 after a pandemic, and it's still facing all this opposition in the most progressive state in the union? How do you, is there some merit to you, actually holding up some of your colleagues and saying, well, I see that, all the studies have been done. It's going to cost less. It actually, even if it costs a little bit more, we're covering everyone, right? And you're not supporting this, And, you also potentially have taken some money from some of these industries, and that could be a little telling. Now, it feels to me that on the national level and on a state level, that adversarial type of politics is not the game plan and strategy that progressives are taking. What's your view on that? And if those roadblocks come up in this fight, what's your strategy and plan on getting over those hurdles?
Yeah, no, that's a very fair question. Like, to how much do you push, pull, but I think that if we don't have enough support to be able to do the aggressive push it forward. I mean, it's like, and I know that people see like, oh, what about Joe Manchin? Well, Joe Manchin is one person because we only have 50 people in the U.S. Senate. That one person can do it. If we had 55 Democrats, would that one Joe Manchin make as much of a difference? Well, no, he wouldn't. Now, the reality is we don't have, just like we don't have 50 progressive senators or 250 progressive Congress members, we don't have 41, or in the case of having to do what's called a constitutional amendment, an ACA, 54 out of the 80 that are willing to do that. So if I had the leverage to say, you know what, I'm going to push this as Ash Kalra because, it's the right thing to do and I'm going to call everybody out. If I thought that strategy would be successful in getting it done, then yeah, I would consider that strategy. But I don't think it is right now, given the makeup of our legislature today. But I also do believe that there are enough people that believe in single payer that if we can figure out a path forward on the financing and some of the more complex issues, I think that we can get a majority of my colleagues there. I truly believe it, but it's going to take a lot of work to do it. I think we're more likely right now where we sit today to do it that way than that more aggressive approach. But I could be if I try it my way and it doesn't work, but a part of it is that, look, 2024, we're going to have the biggest turnover in the state assembly that we've had in 12 years. It's up to the movement to get people in there that are going to be on board, because we have some districts where we have very conservative members that are in pretty blue districts. And so in 2024, that's an opportunity to have a shift. I'm not saying that, look, I'm not saying it because we should wait for single payer 2024. That's why I'm bringing it now, because I can't wait to 2024. I'm just saying if we want to see a shift in the legislature in that manner where we can be more aggressive, we have to get more people elected that are willing, that are already on board day one.
Speaking to that point, obviously on a national level, like you were saying, 50-50 split in the Senate. What is the percentage of truly progressive members, say people that actually do support a bill like CalCare in the California State Assembly and the California Senate? Like what are the numbers like we're looking at?
It's hard to say. I think it depends to some degree on the issue. Like there are some folks that are progressive on everything, but maybe on criminal justice they're not, or maybe on the environment they're not, or maybe on healthcare, like they're, so it's hard to say. I think we have a lot of people. I'd say we have a lot of people that are progressive on a number of things. To say those, like, we have there's 20 of us, well, I guess 19 now, because Rob Bonta got appointed Attorney General, but there's 19 that are on this bill. Now that's out of 120 in the legislature and about 80 or so Democrats, but that's a good barometer that at least a quarter willing to put their names on this bill. There are more that will vote for it, even though they're not a co-author. So I would say we got a good base of about a couple dozen progressives in the assembly, which is actually a pretty strong base considering 41's a majority. And I'm not saying the delta between the 20, 25, and 41 that the other 15, 16 won't vote for single payer, or won't vote for another progressive bill. They do. That's how we get progressive bills done. I got the Racial Justice Act passed with 49 votes. That's a really healthy number. 49 out of the 61 Democrats to vote. We even got some pretty moderate Democrats to vote for it. And so again, I think it can be issue specific, more so than broad. I mean, there's a few of us that are definitely pretty much every time you can count. Like, I don't take cop money, I don't take corporate money. There's a good number of us that you can pretty much count on pretty much every progressive issue are going to be there. But there is, I think we can get a majority there most of the time on most progressive issues. It just depends. But sometimes what it requires is the watering down of some of the bills, and that gets really frustrating, where you can't get as much as you wanted through,
Right. Okay. So what do you feel? I mean, on a national level, I like to start national and work,
Yeah.
More to the state, because I think there are a lot of similarities between the two. On the national level, a lot of people are calling for progressives, because we have worked hard to get progressives elected. Obviously, you're never, not in 100 years going to have a situation where you have true progressives having a majority within this Democratic Party, which is completely, bought and sold for. I mean, the people at the top take the most money from corporations and then, go and legislate against the people and for the corporations. So, I mean, if we're talking about actually getting, to a point where we have a true majority of real progressives, I mean, that's good. That's a 20, 30, 40-year task. So we're talking about right now, as we're in this crisis, there were a lot of people saying, well, if you have the Joe Manchin types, of course, you're always going to have those roadblocks. You guys have power in a coalition if you stand together and say, we're not actually we're gonna start tanking some of this stuff until you guys start coming around to where the rest of the country is, and to policies that we need in this country right now, because people are in LA are underneath bridges. People don't have access to healthcare, right? So what, I think there's a lot of frustrated people that are tired of saying, okay, well, in 3, 4, 10, 15 years, we can get this done. Y'all just need to keep voting. So is there a feeling of understanding of that sentiment, within the California state legislature, that we got to start getting some of this stuff done and passed right now? We got to start looking towards more aggressive approaches and maybe holding up some bills and threatening people's power, threatening people's position to actually get these things passed. Otherwise, we're just going to be asking nicely for the next 5, 10, 15 years. Is there that sentiment there?
That's a great point. I mean, the reality is, on a lot of these issues, we've been asking nicely for 40 or 50 years or longer, right?
Right.
It again depends on the issue, but I think that one of the things that we've seen some movement on things that we would not have seen, just a handful of years ago, especially criminal justice reform. Not that we've gotten everything we wanted, but we've seen a lot. I mean, we have 2 prisons that are closing. We've seen a shift in a relatively short period of time that we've never seen in our state, to go from the incarceration capital to now be closing prisons, to now getting rid of a lot of these mandatory minimum kind of sentencing enhancements, Racial Justice Act. We're doing a lot of things in that arena. So I think, again, if you go issue by issue, we are seeing some things. I don't think we've done enough on the environment. I think, of course, we're trying to push on single payer, on workers' rights. We've had mixed results. I think that, going back to my earlier point, I think because we do have a lot of folks in the legislature that are very progressive, but typically on certain issues, there might be some issues they're not. We don't get the kind of that tipping point that allows us to do exactly what you're saying, where it's like, okay, well, on this one issue, we have a tipping point enough to do that kind of strategy. To the other point is that we've gotten a lot of things done very successfully by trying to coalition build. Like I said, I've been able to get some more moderate voters on board on our side, because we haven't gone that aggressive. We got rid of predatory lending, the triple-digit lending. We did that. It took us. We hadn't been able to do that in decades. We got that done a couple of years ago by getting moderates on board that weren't on board 3 or 4 years earlier. So it's a little bit different than the federal government, because we are able to do some things that are just not, that wouldn't have been possible a handful of years ago. But that's because the electorate is changing, right? Because the electorate is changing, we're able to achieve that. We have a bill right now to stop our cooperation with ICE. I have a resolution to call on the federal government to actually abolish ICE. And that is moving its way through the legislature. Would that have moved through 5 years ago? I don't think it would have, but I think part of that is the electorate is demanding it. And so I definitely think there's more room for us to move more quickly. And that's where, we'll have to see what kind of strategies and tactics work most effectively to get us there. But, I think that's always the argument: incrementalism versus we push and fight to get what we want and get nothing. And, look, Dr. King faced that. You read a letter from Birmingham jail, that's exactly what it was about. It was the other pastors and what have you were talking the strategy of incrementalism. And he was saying, how long do we have to wait? You tell me to keep waiting and tell me to wait. And that's always what we have to go back to, is like, is which one? I mean, but Civil Rights Act, the Civil Rights Movement, that took a decade to get done, right? But it also wouldn't have gotten done without forcing the issue in the streets. And so that's the constant struggle. It's what I always struggle with, is how much of it is that push and how much of it is kind of the getting people there on the policy. And I think you have to have a combination of both. You have to make people uncomfortable to get them, even while you're trying to get them there. And so I think a lot of my legislation does make folks uncomfortable, but it doesn't mean that I can't get them there. But I've had a lot of frustrations too in having bills die, and it's been tough as well in that regard.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I appreciate the conversation. I think this, like you said, this has a long way to go, but I'll definitely be there. I know my people at Healthcare for LA, they'll be there. And I think, like you said, I think we need to start having actions in the streets, whether that's at City Hall, whether that's at politicians' houses. If you don't think it's nice, if you think it's a little too mean, well, I think it's really, violent that people are dying because they don't have access to healthcare, particularly in California, which, is the most progressive state, or supposedly. And, that's something that we definitely need in this country. We need in the state. So I know that I'll be there. I'll be pushing for those things. I'm hoping to see you there. Like you said, you've been out on the streets in some of these fights. And if it comes down to it, and you need to go nuclear to get this passed, personally, I think that's an option we need to take, because the gravity of the issue and the gravity of the moment is that big. It really is that big. So I appreciate the conversation. Can you let everyone know where to find you, how and what best ways they can, especially if they're here in California, to support CalCare along the way?
Yeah, I mean, you can find me on social media. That's where we connected, on Twitter, Ash_Kalra, and also Instagram. You'll find me there. Similarly, I'm also on TikTok, Facebook, you name it. And you can always send me messages if you have questions. I think to find out more about CalCare, you can go to my website. If you just Google Ash Kalra, you'll find my official website there, and you can always send emails and inquire more about AB 1400. You can also go to the California Nurses Association, CNA, go to their social media handles, and they share a lot of information about CalCare. And they have some great policy folks as well that can help share more about that, as well as the other legislation that I'm working on. Definitely stay connected with me. I'm happy to try my best to keep people as informed as possible.
For sure. Thanks for the conversation. We'll have to have you back on once this bill starts to actually go through some of these committees. So appreciate the conversation.
I appreciate it. I know I'm also not only a big fan of yours, but I know you have Briahna coming up, big fan of hers as well. Say what's up for me.
I will. All right. Appreciate it. Take care. All right. That was our conversation with Assemblyman Ash Kalra. I appreciate his fight. I appreciate him introducing this bill. I think I've tried to plant the seed, within his brain to use some more of these aggressive tactics. I think sometimes when you get into those legislatures and you're around these people, you start to it almost humanizes them, right? But I mean, you can't. It's very dehumanizing for someone in 2021 in America, particularly in California, which is supposed to be a progressive state, to not support something like single payer. I don't care, what their excuse is for not supporting it. That excuse is old. That excuse is tired, and most likely that excuse is bullshit. It's most likely because they're taking money from the healthcare insurance industry, and that's why they're not, and that's why they don't want to support these bills. So we're definitely gonna have Ash back on, and we're gonna talk to him once it's more going through the committees and everything. And if there's certain assembly members who are not supporting it, who are being barricades to this huge monumental piece of legislation that needs to be passed, not in 2024 when we can get more people. We need to keep voting and get more people. No. That needs to be passed right now. That needs to be passed this year. Okay. And so, Washington has another, between Washington and New York, there's two other single payer bills within states. So, we'll keep y'all updated on all that. I see all you guys. I see y'all in the chat. Look, I saw y'all in the chat. Someone said he's not gonna force the vote. Seems like a DSA Democrat. We'll see. I know. Hey, look, I know y'all, my radicals in the chat. I appreciate y'all. Y'all are pushing me in the chat to be more. Y'all are pushing me in the chat to be more aggressive in my questions. So I'm trying. I'm kind of new to interviewing, but I think that was a pretty good interview. We'll be having Briahna Joy Gray on in probably like about 18 minutes. Matter of fact, let me send her the invite real quick. Someone say you need to work on your interviewing skills. Look, okay. I'm trying, okay? I thought I did a pretty damn good job, and I did challenge him. So relax. Give people a chance, but also let them know we'll drop them like a hot potato. Facts. Okay, give me 1 sec. I'm gonna get an invite out to Briahna Joy Gray. And I'm really looking forward to our conversation. We always have a good one. Give me 1 sec. All right, let me catch up on some super chats. I think there was just one that came in. I just don't want to miss that. So you guys, I got my orange juice. What's you guys is I'm trying to get away from soda. Like I don't drink soda at all during the season because it makes me cramp. All that sugar is horrible for you. But I'm trying to get away from soda altogether. And so I'm trying to drink more juice. Although there's sugar in it, it's not as many added sugars. You're doing great, JJ. Thank you. Thank you, Sand Queen. The only way to become a great interviewer is to interview lots of people. That's what I'm doing. I'm trying to step outside of my comfort zone when it comes to these interviews. Drink seltzer, Justin. It's soda without sugar. I know, but the sugar is why I like soda. That's why I like it. It's the sugar. I'm drinking more kombucha because that has like a little bit of sugar in it. So it's got, what I'm addicted to. But it's not like 60 grams of sugar, and it's got the phosphoric acid and soda carbonation should be avoided. Okay. Gotcha. Thank you. But it's got the carbonation. Just drink water. I mean, yeah, I drink water too. Obviously, I got my water. You could say that about anything. Just don't eat fried chicken. Just don't eat sour worms. Like, duh. That's why it's called a vice. Like I'm addicted to sugar because I grew my mom's side of the family is from Mississippi. So my granny would always have Pops, sugary cereal. I mean, just all that shit stacked and ready to go. But I didn't have it at home because once my stepmom married my dad, she took out all the horrible shit that we had in our house. So every time I go over to my granny's house, I would the first thing I would have was a bowl of sugary cereal. Acid and OJ may cause digestive problems. I feel like unhoused, just buy a house. Literally. Break soda addiction with sweet chocolates and real sugar candies. Then soda tastes meh. Okay. I just don't. Because isn't dark chocolate like the only chocolate that's like good for you? Because I like milk chocolate. I don't really like dark chocolate though. It's too bitter. The American food diet makes people addicted to sugar. Yes, that is correct. Hold on, I missed the super chat earlier, and I don't like missing those, so I appreciate when you guys send that. Oh, Sylvester Annie, appreciate the super chat. Ash is also working on ACA 3 to end slavery and involuntary servitude with California. Huge wins are on the way. Okay, bet. I did. I mean, I was looking through, what Ash has proposed and everything, and it's all great bills. It's all great bills. So we just need to push him on being more aggressive, right? Because that's where their power is. Their power is in the people, right? Their power is in their ability to frame a message and then, present some type of ultimatum, right? That's where your power is when you're in the minority, which it's crazy to think, but progressives are actually in the minority in California, which is branded as a very progressive state. No. California is run very similarly to, how the DNC runs the Democratic Party, right? Like it's very similar. It's very similar. You have a lot of neoliberals at the top. People take a lot of corporate money, corporate cash, a lot of real estate developer money, all that stuff. So it's a very, simpatico situation between what progressives here in California are facing and progressives within Congress. Same in Washington. Yeah. California is a Bernie Sanders state. Right. I mean, voter-wise it is. Voter-wise, California is progressive, right? But when it comes to the people in power, that's just not the case. Dark chocolate is an acquired taste. Yeah, I'm still waiting to acquire it. I'm still waiting on that. Although I have been trying a lot more stuff. Like I've been trying a lot more seafood. I've been trying sushi, which I like now. I mean, I'm getting there. It's a texture thing for me. When you grow up in a suburb just eating corporate bullshit food, I mean, it did taste good, but it's not like actual ethnic food that's actually good. Actually has a lot of flavor without all the, the salt and the sugar just poured into it. Kashama Sawant got a lot done in Seattle, which is a progressive city. Yeah, I mean that's what I was trying to bring up and enlighten and illuminate that fact that she was able to get all that done by forcing this shit through and actually showing up, at rallies, showing up at protests, and really pushing the people in that legislature and putting them in a very uncomfortable position to the point where they felt like they had to support these bills, otherwise it would threaten their seat. And that's the only thing they care about. That's the only thing they care about, right? Is that power. Justin, you did better than most professional interviewers. You have a natural talent and ability behind the mic too. Impressive. Politicians will always be disappointing. Electoral politics isn't the way. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And yes, we've seen throughout this year that what we need, obviously is a ground approach, right? We need a grassroots approach, because until they feel that, like I was saying, until they feel threatened, until they feel their power threatened, they're not going to bend. So they'll say everything they want. They'll signal that they support it. Gavin Newsom will run on it. And I forgot to ask Ash, because I went through Speaker Rendon's Twitter and I didn't see a single mention about CalCare. I didn't see a single mention about the introduction of CalCare. So if he really cared about CalCare and it was really in his heart that he wanted it to pass, then why is he not talking about it? Why is he, as the Speaker of the Assembly, not putting any pressure on the other members to actually support it? Right? Next time I have him on, I'm gonna ask him that. Next time I have him on, I'm definitely gonna ask him that, because I went through his whole feed and I didn't see anything about it. Are recalls always successful concerning Sawant? I'm gonna reach out to Kashama Sawant because I want her on the show. I think she is. I mean, she's actually a politician you can seriously look at and look up to. She's risking her own. No, she's actually, as she's, they're trying to recall her because of her getting, attacking Amazon, getting this Amazon tax, and she's an actual politician you can look up to, be like, wow, she's actually out there for the people, and that's all she cares about. That's all she cares about. So I'm definitely going to try and get her on the show coming up pretty soon here. California Dem Party machine politics goes back to the John and Phil Burton brothers in the 60s. They established the corporate, politically driven system that served as a blueprint for the Clinton DLC. Wow. I mean, it's not surprising. I mean, it's crazy that California used to, because Reagan was from California. I think Arnold Schwarzenegger was a Republican governor of California for a while. So he supported Newsom and says we need to do more for the environment, Mr. Fracking Permit. Yeah, I mean, it's honestly sad. You know, that's what I was saying. I think these people, they get into rooms with these people and it humanizes them, right? So then they see the best in these people who are actively, preventing people or actively standing in the way of getting of passing legislation that is going to prevent some of these preventable deaths. So it happens to every single politician. I mean, it happened to the Squad, right? It happened to House Progressives. You can't be on the outside looking in, yelling and screaming, saying you're going to cause a ruckus, saying these people in there like Joe Crowley are corrupt, and that's why you're running against them. Okay, well, Joe Crowley was number 3 or 4 in line behind Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer. So if he was corrupt, you think someone above him that is closer to power is less corrupt? So all of a sudden you get in there and you want to work with them. But you were just talking about how Joe Crowley is corrupt. That's why you needed to run against him. And that's why he wasn't, fit to actually serve. So it just happens, right? It's human nature. They get into these bubbles and then they see, rightfully so, they see how horrible the Republicans are. And they're like, okay, well, they're not quite as bad. These Democrats that are in our caucus, they're not quite as bad. So I guess we're gonna closely align ourselves with them and in stark opposition to the Republicans. But then that just creates that 2-party duopoly, right? You're not an outside agitating force anymore, which we learned through a lot of these interviews that have been coming out lately. And we're actually going to talk about it coming up with Briahna Joy Gray here because there's another article that's come out by Anand Giridharadas or whatever his last name is. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce it. That has some quotes from Jayapal and from Ilhan Omar in there. So we're constantly seeing what the progressive strategy in Congress is. And it's just, it's incomprehensible. It really is. But they're in that bubble. They're in that bubble and they're pretty detached from the real grassroots, right? They're in contact with a lot of these groups, right? But they're in contact with the executives and the leaders of those groups. And a lot of times, like with the Force to Vote and the DSA, there's a disconnect between the leaders of the group and the actual rank and file members. Reagan was a 2-term Republican governor from 67 to 1975. Yeah. Oh, Jordan Allen, appreciate the super chat. Kashama Samad would be an amazing show for the takeover, but I like that. Love your fire, my brother. Appreciate that, man. Appreciate the super chat. So Bree will be coming on pretty soon here. Let me see if she got my invite. Really excited she was my first guest, so really excited to have her back on the show. Ginger tea helps with addiction and nicotine. Caffeine helps with withdrawal to pop as well. Ginger tea. Okay. Does it taste as good as ginger ale? I'm guessing not, unfortunately. Damn, autocorrect. LOL. No problem. Okay, awesome. We have our next guest. I'm excited to bring the one, the only, the legendary Briahna Joy Gray back to the show. Briahna, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. How are you, Justin?
I'm great. I was just telling everyone, like, you're my first guest, so I'm really excited to have you back on the show. It's been a while. I've learned more. I have my tech issues pretty much resolved, so this will be a little smoother than last time.
It wasn't so bad last time. Cut yourself some slack.
Okay. Well, first off, I want to start by saying I follow you on Instagram and I know that, I see you post a lot about your runs. How is it that you're able to run? Well, first off, did you run? Were you a runner in high school and in college?
I was absolutely not.
You weren't. Okay. I mean, I'm just
No.
gonna say it's impressive running 7-8 miles. Like I'm an athlete and I could barely run one.
That is not typical. I did run. I had a long run recently because I was actually preparing for interviewing on Bad Faith podcast, and I listened. I finally subscribed to Audible. Sorry, I'm giving Amazon more of my money, but so that I could listen to his book. Right. Well, so I listened to his book while I multitask, so I stayed out longer than usual because I felt like I was being productive. Typically, I just run. I had a deal with myself at the beginning of last month that I was going to run every single day, and I did it for all of March, and so far I'm doing it for all of April. And so typically I run just like 2 miles. You know, I live 2 miles away from a monument. I won't say which. So I'll just run there and back.
Don't dock yourself.
Right. Or like a longer run will be doing the whole lap around monuments, which is about 5 miles. And I'll do that like half of the time.
That makes me like my legs want to like cry.
Well, Justin, if I were a professional athlete, I would be exercising regularly and wouldn't have had to do this to get back to my pre-campaign, pre-COVID fitness level.
No, I think you're doing a great job. Let me read this super chat real quick. KK Solomon, thanks so much for the super chat. Excited for Bree and JJ. Love the super lefty powers combo. Your shows give me hope. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. So let's start by talking about the Daunte Wright shooting that happened the other day. You know, obviously, you know, we see this happen so often. This one felt almost like it was a tipping point, right? Because it's like, obviously you see this happen and it seems very intentional a lot of times. And this time it's like just almost like malfeasance, right? Like she accidentally shoots the gun. I mean, this is a 26-year veteran. She was the union president, and ostensibly she was out training other officers. And then she's the one accidentally shooting her gun instead of her taser. I feel like that's very indicative of, you know, the state we are, especially when it comes to policing in America. So what was your initial reactions to that?
Yeah. If you are so afraid, I mean, I think we should challenge why it is that people feel so fearful, in particular when confronted with the reality of Black men. But if you, for whatever reason, are so afraid in the course of a traffic stop, that you are so flustered that you can't tell a taser from a firearm, and that you choose to deploy either when it's not clear that either was necessary, then we should really consider as a society whether or not we want people empowered with any kind of weapon in those kind of situations at all. And I bring that up first and foremost because we've all come to understand that these cases turn on a reasonable officer standard. And so often police act with impunity because all of they have to prove is that it was reasonable for them and that from their subjective perspective to be afraid in a scenario. And if they were afraid and all the cops say they were afraid, it was reasonable for them to be afraid. And the underlying bias or lack of regard for the life of other that they are first and foremost supposed to be protecting never comes into the equation. And the conversation has to stop being about whether or not an officer is subjectively afraid, but how we should structure society so that we actually embody the value that we say we have for Black lives.
Right. And just the fact that, I mean, like I was saying, it's so indicative, almost symbolic of the moment we're in, where we're having the George Floyd trial. I mean, miles away, right? Miles away. And then this happens right on the heels of that. And it almost harkens me back to, you know, when we're out here and in the moment, you know, during the general election, you know, all of us were being pressured so much. You got to vote for Joe Biden. You can't say anything bad about him, et cetera, et cetera. But on this issue, we're talking about criminal justice reform. We saw that leaked audio with the civil rights call. And Joe Biden's out there saying, okay, we're going to give more money to police. They just need to learn how to act differently, or we need to have reforms, but we're going to give them more money, which gives them no incentive to change. And now Joe Biden's president, and you have Joe Biden's being very, very nonchalant about the death of a 20-year-old black man, right? And so in your opinion, how do you think that last year and the protests of summer really had any significant impact or will have any significant impact legislatively? Obviously it had a big cultural impact, but it doesn't really feel like, to me, and I want to know your opinion on this, that anything has really changed from now and the George Floyd incident.
The time to make the most powerful demand for changes to our criminal justice system was the time during which Joe Biden was dependent on the votes of the millions of protesters, predominantly young, black, and brown, predominantly the base of the Democratic Party coalition, to beat Donald Trump and become president of the United States. That was the time of greatest leverage for people invested in these issues to make demands of Joe Biden. Some people did make demands of Joe Biden at that time, disconnected from their willingness to vote for him. Right. And Joe Biden, assessing that they were going to vote blue no matter who, ignored those demands. As you pointed out, subsequently, we heard during that leaked call with civil rights leaders that some of those civil rights leaders valiantly endeavored to point out to Joe Biden that he could, via executive action, enact a number of those demands. Sherlyn Ifill, in particular, asked for him to implement a number of policy changes that he could implement via executive order. And he immediately pivoted away from that into the idea that Black Lives Matter as a slogan was harmful to his electoral chances, right, and completely derailed what should have been a substantive conversation about civil rights in America. And everyone, regardless of how disappointed they are in that decision, and disappointed in him as a president, and disappointed in the policies that he continues to champion, and disappointed in the fact that he literally wrote the crime bill, continue to vote for him. And I don't see any direction from leadership of any rank that would suggest that people should do anything else going forward, or apply any kind of alternative pressure to him that would cause him to feel like there are any political consequences to him sitting in the press room that we saw him in the other day with the first Black VP by his side, giving cursory statements about, well, I haven't called the family yet, but yes, it's sad. What I really, really want to be clear about is that under no circumstances is violence okay as a reaction. Apparently, there are circumstances in which violence is okay when you're in a routine traffic stop and you're taking the life of a 20-year-old man and father. But under no circumstances is violence okay when it comes to property damage and the kind of things that Joe Biden was alluding to. And I think that's disgusting. And I think millions of Americans who participated in the protests last summer also think it's disgusting. And the question is going to be what they're going to do about it.
Yeah, I mean, and if we want to talk about legislatively, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, and a lot of people have talked about how that's not nearly close enough to, a real solution. And I would agree with that. It's proposed by the Democrats. So what is it? An incremental step towards something better, of course. But even if you want to, let's grant them that, right? Let's grant them that this is, a solution to policing. The fact that Joe Manchin just wrote an opinion piece in the New York Times saying he's not going to do anything to the filibuster, it completely negates all of that. But I don't hear anyone talking about pressuring Joe Manchin to change his stance. So if you actually believe in that needs to be passed, and it's imperative for Black people, Black and brown people, and just as a society that we need to actually have criminal justice reform and police reform. Well, then if you're saying that the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act is the step we need to take, well, there's a huge roadblock in the middle that no one seems to be talking about. And that's more than just on this issue. It's like, what's your view on that and the larger media landscape not ever, and progressives in Congress, anyone in Congress ever talking about that?
I can't believe that it was only about a week ago that during that first, I guess it was his first press conference, a reporter asked Joe Biden whether or not the filibuster was a Jim Crow relic. And Joe Biden says, absolutely, it was a Jim Crow relic. And the reporter very deftly follows up with, then why aren't you going to abolish it? And he meandered through some kind of word salad of an answer, but there is no good answer for why you would want to continue a policy by your own admission is part of the infrastructure of white supremacy in America that is a barrier to the social and economic equality programs that are needed more in this moment than in any moment in recent American history. There is no excuse. And so what are we getting now? We're getting, subsequently news that the parliamentarian who has suddenly become the most important political figure in America has said, okay, we can do a third reconciliation bill. And there is an argument that that kind of an intervention is just a way to take more pressure off of the conversation of why he won't get rid of the filibuster. And you are going to continue to see an elaborate architecture of excuse making over the course of the next year and right up until the Democrats lose the House or the Senate, at which point they will have a built-in excuse for why they didn't do anything when they had full power to do so. And this is the dance that we're going to keep doing with the two parties in this oligarchy that we live in until at some point somebody decides to leverage the real power that exists in the hands of the people to pressure politicians to actually be beholden to the people who put them in office.
I mean, 100%. I think I've been saying this time after time. It's like we've seen this story before. Now, I personally wasn't, I was 13 in 2009, so I wasn't politically aware and active.
Aww.
But
I was just starting law school, but it's cute. It's fine. It's fine.
It's fine. It's fine.
You're probably a very politically active 13-year-old.
So let's say this, you've definitely seen this before. You've seen this act and this dance before, and the conditions haven't changed, right? And so what do we think is going to be different come 2022 in the midterms that was different than 2010, especially when there's a built-in disadvantage with this gerrymandering that's going on, and the fact that this voting law, this new Voting Rights Act, is not going to get passed with the hurdle of Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, these centrist Democrats, which, once again, no one wants to talk about that. So when, like you were saying, when are we going to start to understand that the time is now, right? The time is now to actually use your powers. And I know you interviewed Anand, and I want to get to the article that he recently wrote, but what was your take on what he kind of believes is what progressives should be doing right now in Congress as far as their power and withholding votes, and actually, because they understand and know the things that actually need to be put into place for us to have somewhat of a more just society, what type of, measures they're actually taking to ensure that we can get that stuff passed and we don't just lose again in 2022.
I am appreciative that Anand, unlike a lot of journalists and people who are allowed access to the mainstream media sphere, reached out to a number of progressives in writing that article. And I appreciate that we had like a 45-minute to an hour-long conversation in advance of him writing it. And it was a conversation in which we spoke at length about moments like Force the Vote that really revealed how much power progressives do in fact have that they chose not to wield. Now, that was alluded to in the article, but it wasn't necessarily given the room to have an impact for a corporate media audience that has been told for the past month that the progressives don't really have any power. And moreover, that Joe Biden doesn't really have any power because of the parliamentarian and Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. So without really communicating that the progressives aren't just asking for more symbolic pushing. They're not just asking for us to wave their fingers. We're not asking for them to wave their fingers more at Joe Biden, but that there was a moment in time, that there continue to be moments in time where progressives or Bernie Sanders in the Senate have the exact same power as Joe Manchin. Progressives in the House have the exact same power as the blue dogs that are challenging the corporate tax rate increase. The exact same amount of power, and are choosing not to use it. And what you see when you look at the corporate media, and we talked about this on Bad Faith, I think last week, I was listening to Pod Save America, and John Favreau compliments progressives for not being the squeaky wheel that gets the grease. Says, oh, thank goodness not drawing lines in the sand like those pesky blue dogs. Well, why on earth are the blue dogs pesky, except for that they're willing to exercise the power that they have to make demands on behalf of their constituents? Why is it that only the people who have a corporatized constituency deem it worthy to exercise their power to deliver for that constituency? And why is it that, all of these people are ignoring the enormous force and power that can come from the people in terms of public protest, independent campaign donations, and all? We just came off of the biggest protest movement in American history. And yet the progressives in Congress, who know that the weight of public opinion is behind them on all of these issues, behave as though they're afraid of their shadow, while the worst person in Congress is gleefully advocating for a lower corporate tax rate. That's an oligarchy.
Right. And the idea that, and it was, I think it was mentioned in your interview with Anand, was that, okay, progressives, the House is more, or I think it might have been on Pod Save America that you covered on Bad Faith podcast, that, obviously the House is more, they have more progressive, there's like 20 of them or whatever. So they have more power because of the slim margin. But if you think about it, numbers wise, of course, there's only 50 senators, and the margin is literally zero. It's 50-50. So, I mean, I was told that Bernie and Elizabeth Warren and Ed Markey and Cory Booker, these are all progressive people, right? I mean, that's another coalition where you could say, well, they're saying they're not gonna vote for this bill unless the salt tax is in there. We're saying we're not gonna vote for the bill unless there's a $20 minimum wage included. So Joe Biden, you can take that to the people and decide which side you want to be on. The people trying to get a repeal of assault lifted, or the people trying to get $20 an hour. Why is that? Why are those measures never taken into place or never even thought of? That's the question.
That is the question. I was watching The West Wing because I'll be going back to my favorite podcast, The West Wing thing, soon. And my assigned episode is an episode in which there's a government shutdown over a similar kind of posture, where they've spent months apparently negotiating this budget. In the last minute, the Republicans say they want to make a bunch of cuts. And President Bartlett says, no, I'm not going to do it. His entire staff thinks he's crazy. Oh my gosh, if you shut the government down, the people are going to hold you responsible. And seniors who don't get their Social Security checks are going to hold you responsible. And Bartlett, who is typically a kind of feckless neoliberal, is the one in this episode who at very least is like, actually, let's make it a moratorium on whether a referendum rather on whether the Republicans are right or wrong, because they're holding up the bill because they want to cut, this money that we're trying to give to kids to pay so they can afford college and all this other good stuff. And of course, the episode resolves in a completely unsatisfying way because it's the West Wing, and Aaron Sorkin thinks that that's crazy. Like the posture of the episode is that President Bartlett is acting insane, because of course it's going to be on him. Every negative effect is on him, regardless of whether or not he's fighting for the good thing or the bad thing. Meanwhile, the Republican speaker in the episode has no hesitation about fighting for all the bad things. And moreover, Sorkin goes to actually frame some of those terrible things like as being a net good, because lowering the deficit is just good to these people because they don't understand how the economy works, but never mind. And that is the situation that we keep getting in, where Democrats frame it as, well, we really care about the people and we're not willing to let we'll take scraps because we'll fight for anything for scraps for our people. And we will never risk anything because of the potentiality that our people might get nothing. But like I said to Anand in that interview, that's exactly how we got to the neoliberal hellscape we're in right now. Because everybody knows that Democrats will bend the knee in every instance. And that is no negotiating position at all. That is a position of submission. And what you are doing is guaranteeing bad outcomes from the people you are claiming to protect for time immemorial.
You know, I was watching a documentary because I did an interview or like a panel with Ho Washington, who's trying to get single payer in Washington, and they had a Power to Heal event where they showed this documentary, and the documentary was about the integration of the hospital system in the 60s and the implementation of Medicare. And I learned so much in that documentary. And one of the main things that I thought was so intriguing was that there was a bunch of states and senators who didn't, they passed to Medicare essentially, but they didn't want to institute it. And they couldn't force them at a federal level. They had to like sign a waiver or whatever, state level. So what Lyndon Johnson did was he brought them and the media and these people, these senators or whoever who didn't want to essentially take that next step, didn't want to sacrifice their seat or just whatever, they were corrupted in whatever way, and he brought them in, and in front of all, they didn't know what the meeting was about, but in front of all the cameras and reporters, he was saying, we're so excited about this Medicare program, and you guys are going to implement it in your own states, right? Like everyone wants this. We need this as a great policy for seniors. You're going to implement this in your state, right? And they were completely taken aback. And in front of all the cameras, they were like, yeah, yes, we will, right? And that's the type of politics when you actually care about something and you actually want something. You're willing to play that hardball. You're willing to actually move mountains, right? You're willing to actually use political capital to get that done. So you're telling me in the 60s, Lyndon Johnson can do that, but we can't withhold a vote on a bill that's a must-pass bill to make sure that Joe Biden feels that same pressure, particularly when he needs this shit to pass and all the conditions and the situation in the country is ripe for this? I'm saying if not now, when 2 years, when everyone's vaccinated or we have herd immunity and everything's functioning and people are watching sports and people are going on their vacations and people are going out in the club, like, America, right? America as it normally is. You're telling me that that's going to be a better situation, a more advantageous situation to get some of this stuff passed than right now when the economy is just starting to open back up and, we're right off of, or really still in a pandemic. It doesn't pass the smell test. It really doesn't. So, I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
It doesn't pass the smell test, but, and I don't mean this with any disrespect, but articles like this one, like Anand's latest, help people to feel like it does. It's a giant air freshener in the room for people who are starting to gain class consciousness because the circumstances demand it. And what an article like that ultimately does is to reframe Joe Biden and his efforts to do the bare minimum that's compelled by the moment as a revolutionary in scope, and to reframe all of his failings as somehow benefits. At one point it's like Joe Biden makes these, social programs that everybody loves seem boring. And that's good because then I guess they're not called socialist and criticized by Republicans, except they're absolutely still called socialists and criticized by Republicans. It also, he doesn't actually advocate for any policies. I don't even understand what it is that he's advocating for that people are snoozing through. He has categorically rejected every linchpin policy that he said he would support. First and foremost, $15 minimum wage. You have climate advocates talking about how much they were listened to in the scope of the Unity Commission, which was a year ago almost. without commentary on how much Joe Biden's infrastructure plan woefully underfunds what we would need in terms of stemming the horrific effects of climate change.
Right.
You know, it's a rehabilitation project, and I don't know. I hope, I wish this article had come out, prior to us interviewing Anand, because I think it would be really interesting fodder for a conversation about, what one's worldview is and what interests are being served by an article that kind of myth makes and ignores the overwhelming frustrations of progressives, which I suspect came out in many of the interviews with progressives. You can hear hints of it in Ilhan Omar's remarks in that article. And I know what I said to Anand over the course of the hour of our conversation. And, if what made it in, that snippet quote of mine is what made it in, and all of the very forceful condemnation I made of Joe Biden didn't, I suspect that even some of the remarks from people like Farshini and Representative Omar might have had a little bit more in terms of criticism in them as well. I mean, that's editorialization. Obviously, I can't know.
Right.
But ultimately, it's frustrating to see progressives characterized in that way, and for them to be so few opportunities for progressives in the progressive media space that we belong to have those same platforms to represent ourselves.
Yeah. And it just felt like the article, it made it seem like, oh, everyone's being listened to. Biden is listening to progressives just like he's listening to the centrists. Like
listening. I mean, yeah, just like he listened to the civil rights leaders and then basically told them to pick rocks.
Yeah, I do want to cover a little bit of it, because there's some there's certain quotes that I want to get to. Let me pull that up really quickly. Of course, now I'm like, where is it? I said I wasn't going to do this, and I'm doing it. Okay, here we go. Okay, why is it not popping up? Okay, hold on. Oh, here we go. Okay, here we go. I got it, everyone. Okay, everyone relax. I got it. Okay. So I mean, yeah, it starts off pretty much. I mean, let's look at the just the title. Welcome to the new progressive era. I mean, just started like the new progressive era. Like where am I missing something, Briahna? Am I not seeing it?
I will caveat this with the fact that often writers don't pick their own titles, but if this were me, there's nothing that I would write that could ever have that title plausibly attached to
even
it.
Be skewed right into thinking that. Okay, yeah. Let's get into it. I want to start here with Ilhan Omar, because like you said, Ilhan Omar actually has been speaking up more against the Biden administration. Really, to me, it looked like it started a lot after that interview she had on MSNBC, where I think it was Mehdi Hassan was pushing her, and essentially she didn't look great in that, okay? And progressives didn't look great in that. And so it has felt a little bit like she's been pushing back more. So let's start here. Among Omar and her colleagues' priorities had been raising the minimum wage to $15. Context on this is they're just talking about Biden and the American Rescue Plan. And I mean, it's kind of saying how it was pretty progressive, even though we know it wasn't. So let's start here. Among Omar and her colleagues' priorities have been raising the minimum wage to $15, a goal Biden professed to share. But when push came to shove in the Senate and a procedural obstacle rose, that was an advisory opinion that by someone who I definitely didn't know who the parliamentarian was. I don't know about you.
Nope.
Biden gave in. Many progressives were angry. Biden personally called Pramila Jayapal, Democrat, Washington, and the Congressional Progressive Caucus chair, and explained the White House's thinking. He suggested that Jayapal and some colleagues talk with his team about a long-term strategy for shared goals. And that meeting actually happened with Biden's chief of staff, Ronald Klain.
Just because you put a personal touch on screwing somebody doesn't make the screwing any less painful.
Exactly. And there seems to be a new standard, and the new standard is we're being talked to now. So it's feeling
to.
better. We're being right. It's
You're
literally
heard.
the legislative version of I see you, I hear you, I'm going to ignore you. And I'm wondering what is a long-term strategy on $15 minimum wage? The damn bill itself is already a long-term strategy because it was $15 by 2026.
Correct.
When $15 right now in today's day and age without inflation in 5 years is already not enough, which I learned, which I mean, it's pretty easy to know. But when you were talking to the Amazon employees was saying Jeff Bezos goes around flaunting this $15 minimum wage when we can barely survive on that in Bessemer, Alabama.
Correct.
So
Correct. We were in the longest period in American history without a $15 minimum wage since we got a minimum. We're in the longest period in American history without a minimum wage raise since we got a minimum wage in 1938. Productivity is up through the roof. Workers have never provided more value to the bosses, and yet we're being told that this bare minimum is not going to pass. And moreover, as we've talked about, I don't know if you want to get back into it, but the way the issue was framed around the parliamentarian also cut off any conversation for a minimum wage raise that's lower than 15. So obviously I don't support that, and I don't think progressives should have cottoned on to that. But very strategically, in other parts of the COVID bill negotiations, there was a kind of a quantitative conversation about how much the check should be, how much the unemployment should be, etc. But because Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema had this procedural exit route dangled in front of them, Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, who have both supported minimum wage raises in the past, to a lesser degree than 15, but have supported them in the past, were not called upon, were not asked to negotiate around the $15 minimum wage. Instead, what you got was a declarative, no, we got to take this out of the bill. Of course, the parliamentarian ruling did not mean they actually had to take it out of the bill. They could have ignored it and left it in, at which point somebody would have had to bring an amendment to take it out of the bill, which would have required 60 votes.
60 votes.
Which they didn't have. Instead, they took it out of the bill so that Bernie had to bring an amendment to put it back in the bill, which required 60 votes, which they also didn't have. So as David Sirota has pointed out, they took a 50-vote situation, are you going to vote for this or not? Can you get 50 plus 1? And turned it into a 60-vote situation to give all the politicians cover for the fact that their corporate donors don't want them to support a $15 minimum wage, despite the fact that overwhelming majorities of Americans across the political spectrum want exactly that.
And does that not, I mean, to me, like if I'm in Congress and I see Chuck Schumer take it out of the bill, essentially filibustering themselves, right, forcing that 60-vote situation, why does that not arise anger and frustration and people going out there and speaking out against it? Like, that's what's frustrating to me. I'm not saying you can control everything that these people do, but you can expose them for making it more difficult to get to a place and into legislation passing, which they claim to support.
Because they don't know. Because the average American isn't reading the Daily Poster. They're reading the Atlantic. And this is the version of events that they get. And it is frustrating. Anand knows better. He knows what happened, because I know I talked about it at length in the course of our interview. He knows what happened.
Right.
And I don't know why it is that other people don't either appreciate the value of communicating those underlying facts, because the scaffolding of acceptance is built with the belief that nothing more could have been done. And talking in detail about the strategic parliamentary obstacles the Democratic Party itself constructed is crucial to understanding why the left, the real left, is angry in this moment. And they refuse to write about that and refuse to print it. I see now that I'm going to have to finish a stupid article that I really didn't feel like writing because I have other things to do in my life. But literally, the only way that anything like that is going to get published is if we write it.
Right.
apparently, and have access to whatever platforms are willing to publish these things. But I'm really appreciative to you and the others in this left media landscape who are continuing to surface the reality.
Truth. That's true. That I appreciate you too. Let's keep diving into this because there's a lot of really good gems in here. This was, after with Biden chief of staff Ronald Klain, they had the meeting. Ilhan Omar said that was a huge signaling. It suggests that progressives might not get everything they want, but she said the administration understands that we are not willing to be taken for granted anymore. That's not true. That's just not true. Okay, I just want to let everyone know that is not true, because the strategy that progressives have put out there is that even if they are ignored, even if something like the one thing that Joe Biden promised Bernie Sanders is taken out of the bill, and it's, instead of everyone getting a $15 minimum wage in this country, progressives got a call from the chief of staff, then they're okay with that, and they're not gonna do anything under any circumstances to be adversarial. They want to just propose good and nice things. So that's just not true. So I would really appreciate it if they stopped saying that shit, because that doesn't, like you were saying, that doesn't help anyone. Okay, I'm not saying that progressives Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm just going on.
No. I'm with you. It feels like at a certain point, progressivism as a fundraising exercise. At a certain point, if you say the things that progressives in the public who support these policies want to hear, it becomes, but you don't ever act on it. You don't actually ever fight or at least call attention to the obstacles that are really there to getting those things. Chiefly Joe Biden and people like Ron Klain, who are going on television, and saying things like, "Oh, I'm not sure if you can overrule the parliamentarian," is what he said in an interview in early March or late February when the ruling first came down. Oh, the advisory opinion.
Right, the ruling. Like it was a judge or something.
He was asked, actually, and to her credit, by Joanne Reed in an interview, well, can't you overrule the parliamentarian? Can't you, by the way, Joanne Reed, big K-Hive person, big supporter of Kamala Harris, can't the first Black female vice president, doesn't she have the power to overrule the parliamentarian? Why, yes, she does. Power to you, queen. Will she? Absolutely not. Because Ron Klain played the fool on television and acted like he didn't even know that was a possibility. And subsequently, Jen Psaki and the rest of the Biden administration said that absolutely not. We are going to respect the parliamentarian's decision, because apparently the parliamentarian's decision deserves more respect than millions of predominantly Black women who are working a minimum wage. The average minimum wage worker in America is a 35-year-old Black woman or something like that. It's disproportionately,
Right.
and apparently that is not the kind of representation that matters in Washington.
Ilhan Omar continued. I guess it wasn't Omar, it was Ro Khanna saying this, but the progressive wing is ascendant in terms of the new members, in terms of grassroots energy, in terms of advocating policies that most Democrats support. Now, I would actually agree with that. In terms of grassroots energy, the progressive wing does have that, and the policies, the progressive wing does have that.
Yes, but I can't pay my rent with grassroots energy.
Exactly, exactly. And here's what frustrates me once again. He says, but the progressive wing is not in the positions of power yet. Another way to put it is that progressives won the conversation but lost the primary. The man in power is not their man. But he's hemmed in by their ideas. That's also not true. So much of this is being framed in the ways that we want. And Jayapal always goes back to, she even said in an interview, we want to be a propositional force, not an oppositional one or a contrarian force, but a propositional one. We want to frame things in the right way. We want to propose good and nice things. That they don't ever get passed, that's not our problem. We're in the business of proposing these things. And Ro Khanna, once again, which is just so frustrating, which tells me that they're not going to be doing anything in the future. And all these articles that have been coming out are true. They're not going to be any type of oppositional force, because he says they're not in the positions of power yet. So because they're not actually the Speaker of the House, which won't happen in this Democratic Party for 50 to 100 years, because they're not in that position, they don't have any power. How frustrating is it for you to continue to hear that when that's just patently false?
I mean, wasn't there a little thing a couple months ago? It's hard for me to remember where
I don't know what it was called.
To decide who the Speaker of the House was going to be. Wasn't there like an opportunity for leverage where to be Speaker of the House, you needed like those 6 or so progressive votes, and they could have held up the vote for consecutive rounds indefinitely until they eventually had to concede so that they would vote for Pelosi or vote for someone in the alternative. I seem to recall there was a point of enormous leverage where the downside, hey, say you don't want to like play games with a must pass bill because people are so hit up because of COVID. I don't accept that, but let's pretend that I appreciate the interest there. What if we instead leveraged a vote where the only thing that really was at play was whether or not Nancy Pelosi were Speaker of the House? Low stakes. We're not talking COVID relief checks. We're not talking vaccine disbursements. All we're talking about is whether one woman gets a title or not. Even then, in the context of forced the vote in January, people talked about it as though it was life or death, cataclysmic consequences. And oh my God, the progressives will lose everything. They'll lose the farm if they, God forbid, withheld their vote. And we got to save up our political capital for the fight for 15. I think you might have been somewhere familiar with that argument.
Somewhere in there, I was
central to that whole discourse.
Somewhere in that. It's just, I mean, after that point, I think a lot of people were awakened to, the situation we find ourselves in. And when power was really there to be grasped and used for the first time that progressives actually had any institutional power in decades, that opportunity was missed. The first must-pass bill, first reconciliation bill, that opportunity was missed. And how many more opportunities at this do you think you're going to get? That's where I fall a lot of the time, is because, I look at these as opportunities, right? You're never gonna. I'm not saying you're gonna get Medicare for all, $15 minimum wage, free college, ending the wars, green, all of that in one swoop, right? But if we're working to get there, then let's start somewhere, right? So you're telling me we're gonna go through about $2 to $3 trillion bills, and we're not gonna get any of that in there? How much more? How much more of a leash do you think that we're gonna get? It's just not going to happen. And because Joe Manchin's not going to overturn the filibuster, you're going to get 2 or 3 cracks at it. And, if you don't do anything now, you're not signaling you're going to do anything with the next reconciliation bill, you got 2 more shots at getting something in there. And it just doesn't look like that's going to happen.
They know nothing. They know nothing's going to happen, which is why you have to frame what has already happened as a progressive feat of historical proportions, and that's how you get articles like this. He's already done it, guys. Mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished. He's
heralded in the next progressive era. Yeah.
Anand writes, one explanation for Biden's progressive turn is that he has never been an ideologue. He has lodestars standing up for the middle class, favoring unions, and so on. But those lodestars have led him to varied results. His superpower, it is often said, is possessing the sense of where the Democratic Party is, where the median of the party is at a given moment. He is the politician in the best sense of the word. Wright told me that is, he sees a parade and he runs and gets in front of it. As long as the parade is not inconsistent with his values. That's the secret here, is that he has no strong ideological preconceptions. The interesting thing is he's very open-minded. He is able to see changes in the operating consensus, the conventional wisdom, and almost intuitively, I don't know that it's conscious. I think he just understands the change and latches onto it. You know what that makes me think of? It's like he licks his finger, sees where the wind is blowing, and then he'll just do that.
Yeah.
Which actually isn't true, because on the minimum wage, you do that, and everyone wants the $15 minimum wage, but he won't do it.
The idea.
So he actually is an ideologue.
Yes. And the idea of painting a fence sitter as a positive quality. I mean, Daunte literally wrote A Circle in Hell for fence sitters and people who were unideologically moored, and people who, imagine saying it's championing someone who just sees parade and gets at the front of it, ignoring the fact that some of those parades are filled with Nazis and segregationists. Oh, wait, Joe Biden is a famous friend and eulogizer of a segregationist.
A literal segregationist.
His legacy of anti-blackness, his legacy of, of frankly, railroading Anita Hill, his entire political legacy, yes, speaks to that quality, and it's bad. It's abhorrent. It's embarrassing. And it was frankly disqualifying to him to be the president of the United States of America. And now we're being asked to celebrate the very quality that resulted in a mass incarceration crisis that decimated my community, and that continues to have downstream effects, the likes of which we saw over and over and over again in 3 separate instances of police violence caught on camera last week? And then the past week? It's exhausting, and it's a form of gaslighting.
Give me one sec.
Sure.
Sorry, we lost our headset for a sec. That's my one technical difficulty for the day. No, but I mean 100%, everything you're saying. It's really frustrating for me, and I know for you, because we were led to believe, and we were led, and the people were saying this in 2016, 2017, and I didn't agree with it 100% then, but I want to say that I was wrong, because it feels like we were sheep herded into this party, and now it seems like you have progressives, right? You have a section of the left, of the broader left, who actually do support these policies, but now we're kind of sectioned off, right? On one side, we have people saying it's great that you support the policy, but if you're not going to do anything to get there, then it's really just the same, right? Then it's really just virtue signaling at that point. And then you have another subsection that's saying, okay, it's just, there are only so many of them, they can only do so much. And so we are even more fragmented than we were 3 or 4 years ago. So what do you think we need to do to kind of bring, is it just going to have to be evidentiary, right? What's going on in society, what's happening legislatively, just to bring us back almost to square one, where we're all actually pushing and pressuring these politicians to actually start using the little power that they have to try and get some of this stuff passed?
I have been doing a lot of readings. I've been really interested in Socialist Alternative, which is a socialist organization with a somewhat different ideological moorings, or I should say has somewhat more concretized ideological commitments than DSA, but similar in nature in terms of an organization. And one of the things I've really enjoyed is doing readings that offer some historical perspective. And most recently, we read about the 1968 French Revolution that I had never read about. And, looking at a historical moment where the people really did, despite not having particularly high union participation rates, it was about 20%, twice as much as we got, but not overwhelming. People rise up and take over their factories, block management, their offices when they wouldn't comply, students shutting down their universities, towns taking over their own kind of management and infrastructure and leadership, taking over the power companies and making sure that food and milk was dispersed to poor families. Really doing it, just coming right up to the edge of people taking the reins and imagining a better world. It's really inspiring, but from our American perspective can seem so far away.
Yeah, daunting. There's no way that'll happen.
But here's the thing.
Right.
It seemed far away in the 60s in France too. They were experiencing an economic boom. Things were really good as far as these things go in their capitalism. And yet the conditions were right because you can't always predict them. And the thing that seems to be the real barrier is a belief that things could be different and an ability to imagine them as different. And that's why I think sometimes articles like this are so frustrating, because they are part of a project in reimagining the present world as being on that trajectory of progress and pretending that the present world is adequate and good.
Right.
Which obviously takes the wind out of the sails of any revolutionary impetus to make things enormously better and collapsing the differences between the various factions of the left who are fighting for dramatically different things. And what I would like to see is some of these progressives actually elevating and foregrounding and spotlighting the extent to which the Democratic Party is the obstacle, not convincing voters. The polls show that everybody agrees on what policies we need. All of the big ticket items, there's complete agreement. We are not a balkanized country in the way that the left and the right wants to pretend that we are. It's a country that's balkanized from the top down. And the bottom is not being heard in the least. And the progressive fighters that were launched into office on the premise that they were going to speak for those people are not doing so. I'm sorry. If you're not pointing out that Joe Biden took more money from private healthcare interests than anybody else in the race, if you're not pointing out that he had a meeting with business interests just before he announced that the parliamentarian was probably going to rule against the $15 minimum wage being included in the bill, and lo and behold, she did. If you're not pointing out those kind of structural corruption style reasons that Joe Biden and the Democratic Party isn't meeting the needs of the moment, then at a certain point you are part of the problem.
Yeah.
And then the pressure is going to start going from you need to pressure Joe Biden to you need to be pressured yourself, because you are not, you are, to your point, Justin, sheep herding and causing more harm than good, because you are letting the steam out of real revolutionary energy that exists, to your other point.
Yeah. And I mentioned this a lot on the show, and I think this is, in sports, right? A lot of times a team, what we talk about is there's a standard, right? There's a standard level of behavior. There's a standard level of expectation. And that standard is applied all across the board, right? From the best player to the worst player, right? That standard is set. What we have here in this country is an issue with setting standards according to, what the expectation and the gravity of the moment and crisis that we're in currently. So it's almost like we were like one of those things where, because we have no standards for anything, we're actually fighting for a $15 minimum wage. And then I hear on your podcast, you interviewed the Amazon employee who says that's not enough. Right. So we're in a situation where we're fighting for something that's not even enough. Right.
Yeah.
Where we're fighting for, we have people out there saying Joe Biden's infrastructure plan is pretty good when it's half of the bare minimum that's necessary to actually get this country to a place where we need to be. And so personally, I will not be doing that anymore. Okay. Because I see the real issues. I see the real crises out there. I see the real hurt. And so to me, there's no point in fighting for something that's below that level. And I wish that progressives and people in Congress and just the left as a whole, we would start doing that, because that's actually how maybe you actually get a $15 minimum wage, even if it's not enough. You have to fight for more. And you have to be willing to, like we've said so many times, you have to be willing to actually sacrifice something. And so if you say, okay, they're gonna tell you that, this is needed and necessary, and yes, it is. But like you said earlier, we can't keep doing this time after time after time after time, accepting crumbs, because this country is at a fever pitch, right? And as the economy starts to open back up, what do we see happening? Food prices going up, gas prices going up, housing prices going up, healthcare prices will go up once those pharma companies start charging exorbitant rates for these vaccine booster shots, et cetera, et cetera. And just with inflation in general, healthcare costs are going to go up. So I think we need to understand that as a society, there's going to be millions more people that will struggle because of this. So the time is now. The time is now to act. We don't have till 2024, 2026, 2030, maybe get more progressives in there. No. We need this now. And that's the message that I will be continuing to urge. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. I'm very grateful for you championing that message, Justin, because the gaslighting is real. The gaslighting is real. I don't know. We talk a lot on the left about, who's a grifter and what the motives of such and such person is. And I think part of why I don't engage in that discourse is because if it's true, it almost is too demoralizing to think of people being so kind of coldly motivated by something like money or access, because there's no chance in like persuading them. Right. And it becomes like, I just prefer to think it's ideological and they're mistaken, not because I'm naive, but because it's like easier on my conscience just to believe that, it's less painful or something.
Right.
But moments like this and articles like these, it's like, I don't know. We have a ways to go.
Yeah.
That's all. But it's fine. There's more of us than ever. They're trying to deplatform people in left media and all of that, but at least we do have access to these, digital modes of communication, and we have our own infrastructure, and, we're part of a historical project, and people's eyes are open and they've been radicalized, and Bernie took us a certain part of the way, and it's just now time for others together to get across that finish line. So.
For sure. Well, I it's always a pleasure talking to you, Briahna. I love Bad Faith Podcast. I talk about it all the time on my show because it's just amazing. It's so informative. I learned so much from that. It's strategic, it's tactical. I love learning all that, and I think you're doing a great job, you and Virgil, on really informing the left on the next steps. Right. So I appreciate you coming on. Is there any? First off, let everyone know where they can find you. I'm sure everyone already knows where to find you, and is there any other interviews you have coming up with any guests, that you can announce that you'll be interviewing on Bad Faith Podcast?
Yeah. So tomorrow's episode will be about all of the criminal justice issues that have really shown its head in the last week or so. One of our guests is on the panel for tomorrow is Laura Bazelon, who wrote that piece back in 2019 about Kamala Harris not being a progressive prosecutor. And we talk a lot about prosecutors and the prosecutors' offices as part of the arm of enforcement that really gets observed when we're having these conversations about abolition and criminal justice reform. And we also have some I don't know how much I should tease it, but we have some big guests that I'm very excited about coming up in the coming weeks. So you can listen for free wherever you get your podcast to our Thursday episodes, or subscribe at patreon.com/badfaithpodcast to hear our Monday episodes, and also to participate in our new Discord, which we're very excited about. And people in there have been very charming and sweet and nice so far. So knock wood, it
so
stays
far.
that way.
before all the trolls get in there.
Right. It's a good community so far. We're going to get some moderators. You want to be a Bad Faith moderator, join the Discord and make your case.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Briahna. Like I said, I appreciate you coming on. Everyone go check out Bad Faith Podcast. One of the best podcasts out there by far. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Briahna.
Thank you, Justin. It's very sweet of you to say. Stay safe.
All right. Yeah. Take care. Wow. Isn't she just the best? And Bad Faith Podcast, honestly, is just an amazing show. It's so informative. I use a lot of, the information I get from there, and just what I learned. Like I talk about, her interview with that Amazon employee so much, because I think it gets you an insight into like what an Amazon worker, right? Middle-aged Black man with a family working at Amazon, like that's salt of the earth, right? Bessemer, Alabama. You actually get an insight into what these people are actually going through, right? The real struggles on the ground. And it taught me what? It taught me that I shouldn't be pushing for a $15 minimum wage, because $15 is not enough. It's not enough. And if it's not enough in Bessemer, Alabama, it's not enough anywhere else in this country. So we should be pushing for $20. We should be pushing for $25. If we land on 20, okay. That's a start. But $15 by 2027 it's just, come on. It's a half measure. It's a half measure's half measure. It's not enough. It's not enough. Okay, I'm gonna be right back. I'm gonna use let me read these super chats really quick. And I saw some come in. I didn't want to interrupt the interview with Briahna. Next time I'm on, I'll try and integrate it a little bit better. I gotta learn how to work, with the super chats coming in, with the story that we're going over and all that stuff. So we'll definitely get to some more questions next time Briahna's on the show. So let me go back to, I think, Sylvester Annie Jr. Appreciate the super chat. I see you on Twitter a lot, Sylvester. So I think I do know who you are. Cops are convicted less than 2% in these murders. We know the criminal justice system is devoid of justice. When do we discuss boycotting, even going to trial? I mean, we're getting to that point where we're going to have to start looking into some more like radical forms of protest, radical forms of just boycotting and taking ourselves out of this corrupt system just in general. Sylvester, again, with the super chat. Appreciate that. Show America that its criminal justice system is so corrupt that we won't participate in it. And the only form of justice is dismantling the PIC and policing system, prison industrial complex and policing system. I agree with that. Appreciate the super chats, Sylvester. SF Thomas, thanks for the super chat. Say it plainly, the Second Amendment needs to repeal or reform, maybe disarm police in the update too. Yeah. I mean, I think the push for taking away police, like not having like police officers with guns doing traffic stops is I mean, at this point, what else are we going to do? You can't just keep allowing this to happen. These cops who are overly scared. And here's my thing. So a cop, because other cops, at a small, tiny percentage are killed at traffic stops, they can approach every single traffic stop with the utmost, they're so nervous and they're so tense and uptight that a 26-year veteran can mistake a taser for a gun for a taser because they're so nervous and all stuff. But me as a Black man, seeing all these other examples of Black men getting killed by police officers, I'm supposed to act rational and calm in a situation where I have a cop who I have no idea what they're about to, if they're going to feel nervous or threatened and all of a sudden just take out their gun and shoot me. I'm supposed to act differently. So for me, I can't look at the relatively small percentage, or just numbers wise, of all the Black men in the country getting killed by police. I can't look at that and act accordingly, but the police officers can when it comes to a traffic stop. Plus, the difference is the police officer is in the position of power. They're the ones given the gun by the state. They're the one given immunity by the state. So I have to act differently, but they can act the same way and bring violence and all this tenseness to every single stop. That doesn't make any sense. So, there was another story about in Texas, a guy who he got busted for having like 2 ounces of weed. He also had schizophrenia. He was using the weed to help him with his schizophrenia, helped him, stay level, which also shows weed doing something. Instead of actually popping a bunch of pills for his schizophrenia, he was using a plant that comes from the ground. He gets arrested by the cops. They put like a what do you call, a spit bag over his face. The guy asphyxiates and dies. Right? So how do I know that if I get arrested that's not going to happen to me? How do I know that? So I can't act accordingly if I'm fearful in a situation where I haven't done anything wrong and I'm getting arrested. but the cop with the gun and 2 other officers there can act like a crazed maniac, scared of everything, and accidentally shoot someone. It's bullshit. It's a horrible, it's a horrible double standard that we're expected to abide by. All right, sorry, I went on a little tangent there. Where was I? SF Tom, okay. Chet's mom 4, appreciate the super chat. Do either of you think Nina Turner will be a fire starter or a wet blanket if elected? I don't know. I don't know. I love Nina Turner. I've met Nina Turner during the Bernie campaign. She was one of the people I was most excited to see and meet. Just hearing her speak, it's unbelievable. She's a great orator. I just, I would want her to get in there and be a firebrand. I would want her to get in there and say, I don't care what anyone else is saying. I don't care this strategy of incrementalism. That's bullshit. I come from, a place. I was a state senator. She's from Ohio. She's seen what NAFTA and the policy of the United States has done to places like Ohio. So I hope she would get in and be that firebrand and say, you know what, we're gonna hold up everything. We're gonna hold up everything until we get X, Y, and Z. That's what I hope. But at this point, I can't say for sure what's gonna happen. I just can't. I think that would be going against all the evidence that has been presented in front of our faces. So I really can't say either way. I'm never gonna, say I don't want her to get elected. I'm not gonna say that. But someone says she's a Democrat, I'm not excited. At this point, that's what it feels like. Jonathan Boyle, appreciate the super chat. Love Bat Faith and the Takeover, some of the most cogent and engaging political content out there. Thank you. I appreciate that. KRTD Media. Hey Justin, great topic. Sent you the info. Okay, I did get that. KRTD Media. I got that on Twitter. I'll respond. Also, another super chat from KRTD. Why is that so hard to say? Media. Thanks for the super chat. The Justice Democrats failed us. The original intention was to be a left Tea Party and force the Democrats to bend to their will. Complete failure. If that was the original intent, which it was, that's what Kyle Kalinske has said, then that is a failed experiment. Now, can they still make change in Congress? Yeah, they can still make change, but the original intent of that experiment is not, not the underlying theme of what they're going to be doing the rest of their time in Congress. And they've literally said that in plain words. Radical Leftist Agenda, appreciate the super chat. I'm so done with this place, administration, the top 1% hitting on all of our wallets. How can we get out of this BS? I'm ready for a revolution. Yeah. This infrastructure bill, right? Or not the infrastructure bill. The last few reconciliation bills under Trump and under Biden. Not a single redistributive policy. I've talked about this a lot. Not a single redistributive policy. What does that do? You print all this money, people's assets get inflated. But who has assets right now? It's just uber wealthy people, hedge funds. They buy up all this property. Middle class people get squeezed out of the housing market. Can't build wealth. That's how most people in middle class build wealth. Because if you want to build wealth in the stock market and other stuff, you need a lot of capital. So middle class people don't have that to spend. So that's how they build wealth through their house. They're being squeezed out of that housing market. You're creating a permanent overlord class of wealthy elites and a permanent underclass who's going to be forever renting to their private hedge fund billionaire landlord who couldn't give a shit about the actual upkeep of the place or anything like that. They just want to collect your rent every single month. So that's when you don't have any redistributive policies, you print $2 trillion, $3 trillion next, and you're not providing any wage increases. With the infrastructure plan, there's going to be jobs created, but it's not going to be nearly enough because not only a small percentage of that is going to be allocated towards actually green energy and creating green jobs. So you're just furthering the wealth gap, right? And then you have all these 0% interest rates. So then super wealthy people just, they go buy more and more and more. It's free money, right? It's free money. Why would I spend $350,000 on a house when I could spend $50,000, get a 0% interest loan from the bank, right? And then have that other $300,000 to go buy another house. So instead of buying one house with that $350,000, I can go buy 5 houses with my 0% interest rate. So you see how this all works. And so the wealth gap, that's why you see these billionaires making $1 trillion, $2 trillion in the past year, right? And then it inflates the stock market. I mean, that's 100% a bubble. The stock market, 100%. I mean, look at it. If you look at, I mean, I'm trying to get someone on the show. If you guys can reach out to him for me, his name is Michael Invests on YouTube. I think it's Michael Invests and Tries to Make Money. I want to get him on the show. I want to get Max Kaiser on the show just to talk a little bit more about this stuff. I'm just learning a lot more about it now, even though I went to Northwestern and have an economics degree. I'm just learning about this stuff now because they don't teach you that shit in school. So we'll keep talking about that stuff. Let me finish these super chats. Jameson, Duan, Justin, sorry to bug you. Sent you DM on Friday regarding NFTs. I'll definitely look into that. Let me get back to your message on Twitter as well. Zach Boyles. Oh, this was for Briahna. I apologize, Zach, but I appreciate the super chat. Briahna, any chance you'll be press secretary again, maybe for presidential candidate Jackson? Or how about the unity model where you both run as equals regardless? Thanks for being consistent. I like that, actually. I'd do that with Briahna. I'd run as like we're both, we're a package deal. That'd be cool. Okay. I have a few more. KRTD Media again, Amazon Union. Yeah, I think I covered the Amazon Union, and we'll see where it goes from here. Obviously, I think the vote failed, but they might have to do a revote because the NLRB, I think, is filing something against Amazon for their corrupt anti-union practices. Another super chat from KRTD Media. Appreciate that. I sent you a DM on your Twitter with regards of the info for the summit. Yes, I will look at that as well. Brendan Connolly, keep up the great work, Justin. Appreciate that, man. From Canada. Love that. Okay, give me a few minutes. I have to use the bathroom, but I will be right back. Okay. We are back. This is the Jack. What's up, Jackson? This is the Jackson Hinkle show now. Yo, Jackson just announced. I don't know if he announced it yet. Actually, I don't want to say it if he hasn't announced it. But Jackson Hinkle has a really cool. Muted. Am I muted? Can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me? I should be good, right? But Jackson has something really cool coming up. Really cool coming up May 1st. I don't want to announce it for him. I don't know if he's announced it yet. But do you keep up with the NHL? I don't. I barely. And I'm a huge. I was originally a huge basketball fan. Before I was a football fan, actually. I thought basketball was going to be what I was going to play. But it ended up being football because I was better at it. KRTD. I can't say that fast. KRTD Media. Appreciate the super chat again. I want to start making sure I put you guys' super chats on the screen just so everyone can see it. Thanks so much for the super chat. I'm getting better. I'm getting better at this. You think you can interview Kaepernick for a general conversation about politics? I'm gonna reach out to him. That'd be really cool. That'd be amazing, actually. I think that'd be a huge interview. I'll try and get that, but I don't know if I'm big enough for him to respond or pay attention to me, but we'll see. Which NBA team do you like? You know, my favorite player was Dwayne Wade. He was like my idol growing up. And it's actually really nice that he is very socially progressive. You know, politics wise, you know, pretty much like every other celebrity, you know, they're like Democrat because they think that means that they're good people. But I'm glad he's very socially progressive, and I love that. And it's nice when you're like, you know, people that were heroes to you and younger don't turn out to be just absolute assholes, horrible people. So we're going to be interviewing Kenneth Mejia really soon. He is running for the LA City Controller, and some places they call it Comptroller. I don't know they have a difference, but basically I think that means you're like the accountant for the city. So that'll be fun. Let me go ahead and send him that invite. When he gets a sec, he'll respond to me. Can you get Charles Barkley on the show to talk about what he said on TNT? Hello. I doubt Charles Barkley would come on the show, but I'll definitely reach out. I'll definitely reach out. By the way, I had a toothache today. Took some cannabis oil, took away the pain. Fucking nuts. Now rolling one up. Go crazy. Yo, go crazy. Isn't that wild? Isn't it wild that something like weed, plant from the ground, was been there for hundreds, thousands, millions of years? Ostensibly, you know, native tribes and people in the past used it as an herb, right? Whenever you watch these old time shows and they're like mixing up the herbs and shit, and they heal people before they had, you know, Western medicine, where they just create pills and pills for those pills and pills for those side effects and all that other shit. Actually had holistic approaches to medicine. Isn't it crazy that they make illegal? This is literally the society we live in, where they make that illegal. But you know, there's a funny Cat Williams bit. There's a funny Cat Williams bit where he's a black comedian. He says, you know, it's just a plant. It just grow like that. You won't overdose on that. But if you take 12 aspirins, it'll be your last headache. And that's right, because you take 10 or 15 of those shit, you overdose. You're not gonna overdose on weed. Like, it's just crazy that something that actually has nutritional and medicinal benefits, they make illegal. People don't overdose on it. It actually improves people's lives. But then alcohol, which you can drink enough of that you just completely forget all of what happens. Like, 6-7 hours of your existence, you just forget it. And people get in it, they don't know what the fuck's going on. They like the Chiefs head coach, his son was like, had a crazy blood alcohol level day before the Super Bowl, and crashed his car into a 5-year-old, got paralyzed. If he just smoked weed, do you think that would have happened? No. But that's the alcohol is not illegal, but the weed is. Alcohol poisoning is a thing. You can die of it. Yeah, a bunch of people die of that. It's just crazy. It would be impressive if someone OD'd on weed, literally. I had a lot once, and what did they say? I had a lot once, and it felt terrible, but the right amount is always amazing. Yeah, I mean, if you can always have too much of anything, but you had too much of that as opposed to having too much of something else. What do? You just go to sleep. Right? It's not like you black out or you're just projectile vomiting everywhere. Actually, unless you do edibles, you can definitely do too much of that. It's about 1,500 pounds of smokable weed in 15 minutes to OD. That's crazy. Okay, let me see if Kenneth responds. I just got to send him the invite. And he'll be on in a little bit. One time I put weed in a hookah and got blasted, literally hallucinating. Never done that, but I didn't die. Exactly. Drug cartels are killing thousands. Need to take them out of the equation. Might stop refugees. Just saying. Yeah, and I did another story on that because the New York Times came out with a report that overdose deaths, I mean, have skyrocketed because of the pandemic. So, yeah, I think we should definitely be steering people away from that type of stuff. But of course, you know, the Reagan. Has anyone else watched? I think it's Crack Cocaine and something. It's a Netflix documentary. It's really good. It's really good. CIA runs the drug trade. Mm-hmm. J. Edgar Hoover saw cannabis as a great way to create racial tension and build the power of the FBI. It's crazy how freaking evil some of these people, I mean, not just in the past, but when you look back at just some of the evil shit that and the ramifications that their decisions had, I mean, it's just crazy. Fine, I guess we're taking dabs. Go crazy. I'm on camera, so I'm chilling. Okay, here we go. We're going to get Kenneth in here in a sec. Let me invite him to the show. Give me one sec, folks. Fuller.com. So we're going to have Kenneth on in a second. We're going to be talking about money. We're going to be talking about money. He's running for the controller of LA, which is, I guess, like kind of the accountant of the city. So that'll be great. That'll be great when he gets on here. 27% THC would be a micro hit for me. Damn, okay. You've probably been at it for a minute. This is the best show on TV, yo. Yes, sir. Kenneth gonna audit LAPD. We need that. KRTD Media, appreciate the super chat again. Interview Jesse Ventura about marijuana manifesto. Okay, I like Jesse Ventura a lot. I wish he would have ran for president. So yeah, let me reach out to him as well. We have 3 weed stores in this town of 1,500 and 2 liquor stores. Damn, okay. That's a pretty big amount. Because I like in Chicago, it just got legalized, and when I was back there, I was surprised that there's just not a lot of dispensaries. There's just not a lot of dispensaries. Okay, the moment we've all been waiting for. We have our next guest, so let's welcome Kenneth Mejia to the stream. What's up, Kenneth?
Hey, how's it going, Justin? Hey, everybody.
It's good. It's good to see you finally. You know, I follow you on Twitter. I mean, you have great tweets, great informative tweets that I think has really helped me realize that all this shit they say we can't pay for, of course we can pay for it. We can pay for whatever we want. We just have to take money away from some places and put it towards other places. So why don't you tell everyone a little bit about your background and the office that you're running for?
Yeah, exactly. So, hi, everyone. My name is Kenneth Mejia. I am a candidate for Los Angeles City Controller. Our election is on June 7th, 2022. I am a housing justice activist. I'm a member of the LA Tenants Union, where we fight for tenants' rights and against landlords who harass and try to evict tenants out all the time. I'm also a certified public accountant. I've been an auditor and accountant with 11 years of experience. And so this controller position is exactly that. It is the city's chief accounting officer and also the auditor of the city of LA, which is the second largest city. So a lot of responsibility. And like you said, the money's there. It's just how is it being used, and, you know, where could it go, and, you know, is it being used properly? So great to be here.
Yeah, appreciate you coming on. So, like, what exactly? So you have the power to audit. Is that your main power as a city controller, or do you have any say in the budget or any of that?
Yeah. So you know, as the different roles that they have. So as the chief accounting officer, so we're in charge of making sure that every transaction, everything is accounted for, it's booked. And with that job, you can also make that information transparent and put that info out there. I think that's a very, very big deal. If you have a progressive controller in charge of the finances, you can have someone put info out there regularly, you know, especially on issues that people care about. And I think that's why it's really important to have a progressive controller, because there's so much that they know behind the scenes that a lot of people don't. And if they put it out there, because we're not in a policy making position, it can push the masses to lobby their city council members. to like, show up and protest and be like, hey, we found this out from the controller that we're spending this much money. So that's like one big thing, is just being super transparent. The next thing we could do is we could also, like you said, be an auditor. And not only can we audit the city's finances to see if there's any like cheating or whatnot, but we could also find wasteful spending. We can also do performance audits as well. We could see if the LAPD is performing effectively with all the $3 billion in change we're giving them. And I think that's something that the city controller in the past hasn't done yet with these large departments like the LAPD. And that's something we can do. We can audit pretty much anything. It doesn't have to just be financial. It could be performance. And in terms of budgets, we don't have a direct say on what goes into it. That's the mayor and the city council, but we are in charge of when it does get approved. And by the way, if you live in LA, it's gonna be introduced next week. So there's gonna be a huge storm that's gonna happen. So that's gonna be next week. But once it gets approved, then we're the ones in charge to make sure that we're not going over budget, and we're spending based on what the council and mayor approve.
Okay, awesome. We'll definitely be on the lookout for that. And just speaking of the LAPD, I see someone saying, damn, are they really getting $3 billion? Yes, they are. Let me show this tweet that you actually just put out recently. In light of the budget coming up here pretty soon, you said, reminder, next week the LA City budget will be released. Budgets reflect priorities. I'm so glad you said that, because that's exactly 100% true. You say we can end homelessness and do sorry, this is the LA Homeless Services Authority Executive Director said this. We can end homelessness. And how do we do this? Because we created it. Policy choices and underinvestment brought us to where we are today. So just in light of, like, why don't you expound upon exactly why the LAPD budget is so big, and just as far as like surpluses go, why they actually have to spend that $3 billion, all of it, every single year, or else, people might be like, oh, I guess you don't really need all that. So why don't you expound upon that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, the city's budget is about $10 billion, and the city allocates $3 billion of that to the LAPD, so 30%. It is the largest share. And about close to 40% of all city government employees work for the LAPD. That's about close to 14,000 employees. And if you see there, those chances are high to running in a government employee, and then they'll be working for the LAPD, right? And so we put a huge emphasis on the police, thinking that we'll be safer, that they're needed for every little instance, whether they're dealing with like a mental health crisis or even pulling people over for traffic citations. So, we spend a lot for them to handle all these roles. And I think that's really shown in our budget, right? And, that graphic you just shared, you could see other critical areas that are not getting the funding. So if we know that the city's budget, 30% is going to the LAPD, only 4% of that's going to solve homelessness. Only 1% of that is going to helping people in housing. And so, it really is priorities that are not really reflecting what the community needs. We need, the two biggest issues in Los Angeles right now are solving homelessness and affordable housing. And if we're not putting a huge focus on that, if we're not protecting tenants from landlords, if we're not trying to, cancel the rent during a pandemic, then it's sort of like this revolving circle, right? Because if you don't tackle those issues, what ends up happening is you have to call the police. Like if there's someone who cannot afford the rent because the pandemic started and the city is not canceling the rent, then the landlord's going to call who? The police to evict them, and then you have to fund the police to do that. Or the same thing, if you're not housing our unhoused population, if you're not providing services or whatnot, what ends up happening is if something happens, they call the police. And so it's like we're always treating symptoms and not trying to go after root causes, right? And that's why orgs like Black Lives Matter LA are calling for reimagining public safety, and reimagining public safety is something like healthcare or housing or education. And I think that's really, really what we have to focus our priorities on through our budgets.
For sure. And, recently what happened in LA, I know you were tweeting about it, and a lot of, I talked about it. There were protests about it. Was the, Echo Park situation where there's a lot of homeless people there, who were, living at the lake. And then, a bunch of, wealthier tenants were just tired of seeing, the homeless people by the lake. So the police came in, pretty much cleared them out. But before they cleared them out, there were a few nights of protests. And what I found so interesting was your reporting about how much money they were spending on police and helicopters and all that being there for those 2 days. So why don't you tell everyone what ended up being the final number, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I mean, so for those who are watching outside of LA, a couple of weeks ago in Los Angeles, in the neighborhood of Echo Park, there are unhoused residents who lived in the park for close to a year, and they were able to self-sufficiently survive on their own. They weren't bothering anybody. They even had their own hygiene stations and bathrooms, and they looked out for one another, right? Mm-hmm. And basically, the city council member, Mitchell Farrell, in conjunction with also the mayor and other organizations like the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority. So there's all these orgs who were just involved, and the council member, under the guise of doing $600,000 worth of repairs, was like, we have to clear the camp. And in LA, sweeps are huge. They're violent, and then they take your property and they throw it away. They even throw away your medication, and they leave our unhoused neighbors like stranded without nothing. And so, that was happening at a large scale at Echo Park, and the cops, were there. There are over 400 police every night, from like Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Mm-hmm. And, it was just very, very cruel. They had so many helicopters and cars and buses. They arrested 182 people. Then during the night of the 182 protests, it was a peaceful vigil, and it just goes to show that, like, disregard on human life, right, for the most vulnerable, because that's what it was for. It was to get people out of the park, for these renovations that when we started calculating the cost of like overtime and payroll and bonuses and salaries, it was way more than the repairs. And so we calculated in like the 3 nights of having the cops there to basically kick out our unhoused neighbors from the park. It was basically over 800,000 just for 3 nights. And that number is, underestimated too. And so, and that's like when you compare the $600,000 in repairs versus how much money we're doing to forcefully evict people, it just didn't make sense. And I think, it caused a huge uproar. A lot of media outlets responded to it. It was a big deal. So, that's just another reason on why we need to focus and shift our priorities.
Yeah, $800,000.
Yeah,
there were like 200 something people living in Echo Park. How long can you house those people for $800,000? Like, that is just unbelievably ridiculous. You're just wasting money, throwing it away at cops, forcefully removing these people who are unhoused, have been there for a year, have developed a community. You spent $800,000 that you could have used to just house them. Like, is that not, like, how do we get it out to people that this money is just being wasted, and the same amounts could be used to actually provide housing for these people and get them on their feet, provide jobs? Like, it's just unbelievable. Like, do people like know? Do you think the like normal average Los Angelan like actually knows that $800,000-$900,000 went for 2 nights to sweep these people out instead of just housing them?
I don't think they do, and I think that's why that one of our posts that we did went like super viral. And once they saw the amount of money and for the reasons we were spending that money, they're like, wait a second, like 800,000 in 3 days just to clear people from living, right? Once they found that out, they were shocked. And so I think that's why it's important to have a progressive and a proactive city controller who can get that information out there. And and we're seeing it now. Like, the same city council member just made a tweet the other day and was like, we're spending $1.5 million. And right behind them was a parking lot, and they were drawing squares on the parking lot. And it's like, we're going to pay $1.5 million for 70 squares. It's like, wait, why don't you just give the $1.5 million to them and to them get their apartments? Like, I kid you not, it's literally an empty parking lot with white paint. And they're like, this is housing. And I'm like, no, it's not. So it's totally,
does that have to do with, let me just pull this up real quick, because I wanted to ask you about this, because I personally don't know exactly what all of this means. Can you explain this to us? Let me just read it real quick. The city of LA has paid, that's at $2.3 million to pallet shelter since 2020 to today for close to 280 pallet shelters. What are pallet shelters? Can you explain to my audience and me, quite frankly, like what that is?
Yeah, so this one is a separate tweet, and this one is about pallet shelters. So people are calling this like the equivalent to tiny homes. And so we hear about tiny homes a lot. And so one of the solutions that City Council in LA is trying to implement are these tiny homes. And so they cost anywhere between $7,000 to $9,000. And then you also have to add in all the overhead costs, like to install the electricity around the site and all the other additions. But we've purchased about 280 pallet shelter or tiny homes, and basically they are these 8x8 storage units. And that's even what the vendor calls it. They call it a storage unit, and you have to fit two people in there. And so it's not really like dignified, and it's really like a small bunk. You don't have your own bathroom or anything. It's just, you're just using that to like sleep, and you have strict curfews if you stay in these safe parking lots, or if you stay in these tiny homes. And so that's what these are. And that's just another thing to talk about too, is like all the strict guidelines that people have to live by as well.
Yes. So you said, so it has to fit two per. So does that mean like this is supposed to be for 560 people?
Right. So if we purchased around 280 pallet shelters, it's for two people, so 560. And what people say, it's like it's better than nothing, but it's also, it comes with a lot of restrictions, and some people have curfews that you have to be there by 7 o'clock at night or 8 o'clock, and it's like you're not really living dignified.
Yeah, it's just not. Why are you it's just, you're dehumanizing them, right? Like, what are they, kids? You have to, these are grown ass people, and you're telling them they have to be in by 7 or 8 o'clock, which is the reason, like, coming back to like the Echo Park situation, when it came to housing people and, with Project Room Key and all that stuff, the same thing was applied, right? There was a bunch of these restrictions that people had to live under, which almost made it like, okay, like, fuck that. I'm just not even going to do that because it's so incredibly restrictive. Was that a correct kind of summarization of kind of what happens with some of these like progressive type of housing policies that the city has?
They're temporary solutions, and at the start of the pandemic last year, like over a year ago, we wanted to do Project Room Key to house the county. It's a county program, and it's enacted throughout the state. But we have over 60,000 who are experiencing homeless, and we didn't even get close to a fraction. Like today, I think only 1,600 people are staying at Project Room Key, but the restrictions are from, you can't bring your pets, and like if pets are people's companions, and you have to be back before 7. And if you whatever the reason, if you're late by a minute, you stay outside. And it sucks.
Oh my, that's dystopian.
And there are examples where like people had to go down and get their medication from Sarah, and they came back 5 minutes and they couldn't go back in. And so like this is the progressive Los Angeles that people talk about. It's but it's really, really strict, and it's not a way to live and get your feet back up out the ground.
For sure. Wow. I mean, that's nuts to me. Like, what do you think is like other than LAPD, like where do you think the most wasteful spending like occurs from the research you've done, and like what would you want to mostly have an effect on if you were able to become the controller next year?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely reallocate funding to go to housing, more so. The way it works is our housing department right now is in charge of making sure that tenants who live throughout LA, whether it's rent controlled or not, don't get harassed and evicted and displaced. And there are a lot of cases where that's happening, but there aren't enough people at the department to help these tenants. And that leads to homelessness, right? Because if you evict somebody and they don't know their rights and they're getting harassed, and say like you called into the housing department to help you, but no one's picking up the phone or helping you, then you're out on the street or you have to move. And so I would definitely love to put more money into housing in terms of a service to protect tenants. Also, making sure that there are funds to preserve a lot of our existing affordable housing. So right now, there's this whole big issue in LA about affordable housing, because you hear that a lot. But in LA, what that means is private landlords and property managers will build apartments and they'll be designated as affordable housing. And everyone's like, yeah, this is great. But what people don't know is that these affordable housing comes with covenants. And so they'll expire in 30 years. And so what that means is that a lot of these affordable housing that we have on the market are about to lose their affordable housing covenants. And in people's rents, for example, in Chinatown at Hillside Via, there's 120 units of people about to get evicted because their rent went from $800 to $3,000 because now it went from affordable housing to market rate. And so I would love to put more funding to purchase these or using eminent domain to purchase these once affordable housings to actually be owned by the government, to be public housing. And so that's another area as well. And then obviously just putting more focus onto housing and services for our those experiencing homelessness is where I would put more focus on.
Awesome. We got to get you in there. We have to. It's an absolute necessity that happens. I've been to LA a lot, and one thing that frustrates me a few things more than obviously what we've been talking about is the lack of funding that seems to go towards infrastructure. Now that's roads, bridges, all that type of stuff, but also public transportation. If you ride the metro, it's just literally just looks like it's from like the 50s or something. What type of money is being spent in that area? And would you be pushing to spend more to actually make LA up to standard, right? Up to 2021 standards when it comes to infrastructure?
Yeah, infrastructure and transportation is like a huge area of need and improvement. And that one, like I said, that one even gets less. That gets around like 3% of the total budget, and whatnot. And so, if you drive around LA, like the roads are in terrible condition.
Horrible.
There are some zip codes in LA that are a lot better and nicer, but if you like go down to LA or like on Olympic or go down South Central or just keep going
Broadway,
down south,
any street.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a huge area that we need to put money on. We're trying to move away from always just expanding and rebuilding for our freeways and whatnot, and moving more towards transit friendly, rail or buses and whatnot. Because like I said, it's just when you look at infrastructure and transportation as a whole, there's just so much traffic that also ties into congestion and time being wasted and environmental issues as well. And so, I think there's a lot to be fixed that we could put, such as repairing holes, potholes, sidewalks, making the city more walkable, more bike friendly, and more clean energy oriented by moving towards like buses and rail. So yeah, we spend like, I think the budget for transportation is like 3% of the total budget. So, but yeah.
Like you said, it's priorities, right? And when you spend 3% year over year, you're going to get the shit infrastructure that we have in LA. It's unbelievable.
Exactly. And that's what I tell people. It's like, if that's a good analogy that I tell people is, if you give the LAPD the most money, you're going to give them the best equipment. You're going to give them the best
vehicles, the best uniforms, the best everything. But if you only give crumbs to housing, homelessness, or transportation, and when people visit LA, they're going to see just like, wow, why is housing so terrible? Like, why is transportation so bad? And that's exactly what you just said. If you were only giving so much to these critical departments, but you're giving everything to the police, and they have the best equipment and they have the best everything. So, yeah.
Right. And then, you know, I don't know if anyone watches The Office, but I always like to bring up the episode where Michael doesn't understand what a surplus is. But basically, if you have a surplus at the end of the year with your budget, you want to make sure you spend that money so that it doesn't look like you don't need it anymore. Right. So when you give all that money to the cops every single year, what are they going to do with it? Well, they're going to spend it on new vehicles, new guns, new gear, new everything, motorcycles, tanks, like all this shit that they don't need, but they're going to spend it every single year because they want to make sure they get that for the next year. And then it always grows. I mean, their budget always gets bigger every single year. So, I mean, it's just, I mean, you like I'm preaching to the choir. We all understand this, but it's a real issue. It's a real issue. And I mean, I love your campaign. I love what you say on Twitter. You know, if you know, you're always welcome on my show. And where can people find you? Remind everyone once again, if they're in LA, in California, when the election is, and how can we support you?
Yeah, so our election is June 7th, 2022, and you all can visit mejiaforcontroller.com. MEJIAFORCONTROLLER.com, or you could just visit us on social media at Kenneth Mejia LA. And yeah, if you all live here, we'd love to have you on our team. If you live in the city of LA, your donations get multiplied 6 times. So if someone donates $20, the city will give us an additional $120. If someone donates $200, the city will give us $1,200. And so that's one of like the biggest reasons why we ran, because of these matching funds. And I don't know, a lot of cities do this. And so we're definitely taking advantage of it. So yeah, feel free to sign up to volunteer, learn more, and yeah, donate if you can.
Cool. Well, everyone, make sure y'all go check out Kenneth. You know, he's doing work that is vitally necessary. We definitely need him in there. I think that'll right a lot of wrongs, or at least be a first step to righting a lot of wrongs when it comes to funding within LA. So thanks so much for coming on the show. Everyone go donate to Kenneth and let's get him in there next year. Appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, and then one last thing, next week, April 20th, the city budget will be released. And so if you want to chat again for like 10, 15 minutes, because that's going to be the biggest thing, let me know, and I'd be happy to explain to everyone what is going into the city budget. And yeah, for sure. Book it next. What is that? Next Tuesday, right? Yeah, next Wednesday, but I'll probably need like Wednesday, a day or two to analyze it. But definitely, I'll send you a message, and we could link back up and tell the world what's going in this budget. But thanks, Justin.
All right, appreciate it, Kenneth.
All right,
take care. Awesome. Wow, that we need him in there. Trust me, if you lived in LA or you lived around LA, you'd understand. We need him in there, because if you've never been to LA, you've never been to downtown LA, you just really don't understand. When you look around, there's unhoused people literally everywhere, under every bridge. There's tent cities all over. The infrastructure is crumbling. It's horrible. There's no public transportation. It looks like it's from the 60s, the 50s. I mean, there's just no investment in, things that are actually going to help people get around. These are going to help people live, survive, live in dignity. There's just nothing. It all goes to the cops. And you see the cops everywhere. The cops are everywhere. McCade Miller said, I live in LA. I'm definitely voting for him. Me too. So, okay. Wow. This is definitely the longest live stream I've done. Let me make sure I didn't miss any super chats. I will be on the Jimmy Dore show in about a half hour, I believe. But I need to get ready for that. I'm hungry as hell. I need to eat and get my thoughts underneath me before I jump on that. Cause Jimmy's show is going to be crazy. Okay, let me go back to these super chats. KRTD Media, appreciate you coming through with the super chats. Really like this. Great. Really like the show. Great show. Thank you. Appreciate that. Would you consider interviewing a Democrat running for Senate who said on cam he will debate any third-party candidates? Sure. I mean, I'm down to interview anybody. KRTD Media again. Appreciate the super chat. Interview Jesse Ventura about marijuana manifesto. I think I read that. Jasmine Burrows came through with the empty message super chat. Yo, I appreciate that. Appreciate that. KRTD Media once again. Audit taxes of politicians in LA. Yeah, we have some corrupt ass politicians here in LA and California more broadly. And finally, KRTD Media again. Appreciate the super chats. If I was in LA, he'd have my vote. Like that guy. Yeah, me too. Me too. I mean, he's a great follow on Twitter. So everyone, make sure y'all follow him on Twitter. Appreciate everyone for coming in, stopping by the show. It was a long one, so thank you for everyone who stayed on the whole time. DJ Kemster said good vibes, good vibes, good vibes. That's what I'm all about. I'm all about those good vibes. We're in here, we're fighting for the right shit. You know, we're fighting for a more just society. Someone's got to do it, right? Someone's got to step up, someone's got to talk. I'm glad to be that person, and we're going to pull more people along with us. So thank you everyone for joining the show. We'll have more content tomorrow. We probably won't live stream, but we'll put a few videos out. I probably won't do anything this weekend, but we'll start back next week. We're going to have some great guests on next week. So everyone make sure hit the bell hit the bell for notifications. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure, you hit a like on this video. Make sure y'all keep stopping by the show. We're learning a lot when we're learning it together. So I appreciate y'all being here, and you guys can find me over at the Jimmy Dore Show coming up here soon. So, Justin, do you need moderators? Low-key, I do. Next time in the stream, we'll talk about it. Appreciate y'all. Everyone, stay safe.